I started college as a musical theater major, and I went on to be a history major, and I focused on medieval and Renaissance British history, which was not the most practical thing that I could have majored in. At a certain point, I needed to get more practical about what I was going to be doing in my life. So I decided I was going to go to law school.
24-year-old Jessica Ravel grew up in New Jersey and is in her second year of law school at Rutgers University when the unthinkable happens nearby.
Okay, it sounds like we have some breaking news to tell you about out of New York. There's a
fire burning in the World Trade Center right now. We're just hearing about that right now.
Afterwards, I wanted to do something to help. Eventually, it kind of came to me that the skills of being a lawyer translated into being able to work in the intelligence community or service in the Navy. It was a place that I really could contribute and do something towards helping after 9/11.
With a vision for her future now crystallizing, Jessica sinks herself into her studies, leaving little time for leisure.
Everything was just going really well, but going into the winter of that year, I realized that the thing that was missing in my life was a guy. What I was looking for was someone like me who was working towards an amazing future. I complained to one of my girlfriends that there just weren't any good men in the world anymore, and she laughed and said, "Oh man, do I have the guy for you." He's in the Navy, he is a doctor, he's really just intelligent and funny, and I think you would get along well with him. So I was all like, yeah, bring that on. Let's see where that could go.
It's early December when Jessica heads down to the Hard Rock Cafe in Philadelphia for a blind date with Dr. Jeffrey Marsalis.
I got there first, and when he walked in, I was honestly kind of underwhelmed. He walked in a black t-shirt and black jeans, and he was really pale. And he had this kind of weird flat top haircut. Not too flattering. I mean, not unattractive, but not attractive either. It definitely wasn't love at first sight. Jeff told me that he grew up on the West Coast. His mother ran a school. His father was a pilot. He talked a lot about how he was a flight surgeon in the Navy and his work as an emergency room doctor. There was something I found attractive about him. He was funny, but he was also arrogant. Looking back with hindsight, I think that I made excuses for that. So after the date, Jeff walked me to the train station, and there was no goodnight kiss, which was fine with me at the time. You know, I wasn't sure even that I liked him.
And Jessica isn't sure whether Jeffrey likes her either, until she gets a call from him the following week asking for a second date.
I said, yeah, why not? I didn't have a bad time with him, so why not go out with him again? When we went out for the second time, we actually decided that we were going to get Chinese food and watch a movie at my house. So he came to my door, and before he even walked through, he said, "Hey, Chunky Butt, how are you doing?" And I just kind of looked at him, and I was like, what woman wants to be called Chunky Butt? So I actually said to him, "Hey, could you please not call me that, because it's just not cool." I was a beauty queen. Like, I spent time in a swimsuit being judged on my appearance. Being called Chunky Butt, like, at that time, it was just so not true.
It's an awkward beginning to their evening, but the tension eases up.
We set up the movie and started eating, opened a bottle of wine, and, just talked. We were having a pretty good time, and we got through most of the bottle of wine, and suddenly, I have no idea what happened. I do remember being in my kitchen and him kissing me. And that was the last thing that I remembered until the next morning. All of a sudden, he's in my bed, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I do? I totally didn't mean to do that. That wasn't on my agenda for the evening. There should have been no reason for me to black out after, let's say, half a bottle of wine. Even if I had drunk the entire bottle of wine, blacking out just isn't something that happens to me. So kind of waking up not remembering anything was strange.
That blackout period, that time she can't account for, to wake up and not know why or how somebody is still there, that unknown is very scary.
Jessica doubts herself to the point where she wonders if Jeffrey will have a bad opinion of her for sleeping with him so quickly.
But when he woke up, he told me what a great time he had last night. So I just said to myself, you know what, like, I might as well at this point go out with him again, since we've already gone there. And that morning we went for breakfast. And at some point it turned into a relationship that at first was really nice. He was charming. He was attentive. We talked a lot about having a future together and what that may look like. I remember we went to dinner one night in an Italian restaurant. And this restaurant had kind of an alcove where there was a table for two. No one had ever done something like that for me before. It was very romantic. So at some point, the relationship, it just worked. We were happy. I was happy with him. I was happy with where things were going. He was a good guy. And I was looking forward, into what a future might look like with him.
The relationship becomes serious, but the demands of Jeffrey's job means their time together is often disrupted.
He would frequently call me and say, all right, sorry, I got to go off and save lives. And then he would come home and tell me that, he had saved a baby or a pregnant woman or, something that would really just pull at the heartstrings. That made me feel good that I was dating this guy who really helped people.
It's been barely 2 months since they met, and Jeff goes radio silent for periods of time. Jessica becomes suspicious until one night when he tells her he has an important confession to make.
He said that he was a non-official cover agent for the CIA. He said that he had gotten special permission to tell me because I was someone who was special in his life, who he felt like he was going to have a future with, and that I needed to know and understand who he was and all of him. It's not that he wasn't an ER doctor and he wasn't a flight surgeon. He was, but they were both a cover for what he did for the CIA.
It's a little over a year since 9/11, and fighting terror is on everyone's mind.
That was a major milestone in our relationship. It was clear that he felt like I was someone he wanted to be a part of his life. In fairness, that was flattering to me that he would get special permission to share something so important, with me. There were periods of time when he would go away, that I wouldn't know where he was or where he was going. And during that time, he always said that it was because he was off fighting terrorists.
It will be years before Jessica discovers the unfathomable truth about what Jeff is really doing while undercover.
Marsalis was audacious. He was bold. He felt that he was never going to get caught.
It was just a very Jekyll and Hyde existence.
I took a sip of the drink that was mine, and I don't remember anything until I woke up the next morning. I was in his bed. I had no clothes on. He was next to me. I was very confused.
Jessica Revell is getting deeper into a relationship with Dr. Jeffrey Marsalis, hoping that one day they'd get married and become a power couple.
He was helping people, and that was really attractive to me. We talked a lot about a future together and what that would look like with me as a lawyer, him as the doctor.
In January 2002, Jessica and Jeff go to Bermuda for their first weekend getaway.
When we first landed, it was freezing, and there wasn't anyone around. We got to the hotel. I think that it was under construction because it was an off-season. It was not the most romantic environment for a trip.
Jeff suggests they rent a scooter. They ride out to a remote beach, but the journey is far from idyllic.
I started getting scared. Because it was dark and we were the only people there, I told him that I wanted to go back, and he told me no, and he just kept driving. He was swerving the scooter in a way that felt dangerous to me. He was laughing in a way that just felt incredibly unhinged. And I remember just crying and telling him I wanted to go back, and he was like, "What, do you think I'm gonna kill you?" "I'm afraid. I want to go back. You're not wanting to take me back, and that's just scary."
This could be a test on Jeffrey's behalf of scaring her, but then showing her that nothing's going to happen and he is her protector.
Finally, Jeff climbs on the scooter and they ride back to the hotel.
By the time we got back to the hotel, like, I was just a total mess. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to be there. And it was one of those situations in which he started telling me, "You're going to have to learn to have my sort of sense of humor."
Jeff's strange mood continues, and he seems intent on baiting Jessica.
He proceeded to tell me about a time that he and his friend, who was also in the CIA, saw two guys coming out of the club, and they thought, let's pick a fight. So they picked a fight with the guys.
And this is when Jeff drops a bombshell.
He ended up killing one of them, and his friend put the other one in the hospital. He told me that when the police came, he basically showed them his CIA card, and he got right out of it. That should have been a moment that was just a huge red flag. And I know it sounds probably ridiculous, but he had a way of normalizing things that were just ridiculous and horrible. This is an example of something that I've done with one of my friends. And if you can't appreciate that, then we're not going to be able to have a future together. He had this training, and sometimes instinct just took him somewhere that, normal people don't go. I think that I rationalized that it was part of what he did as part of the CIA.
On another trip, Jeff's vanity is on full display.
We went on this Disney cruise, and then we spent a couple of days in Florida. Jeff was obsessed with taking pictures of him in different settings and different poses and different states of dress. He got really dramatic with the way that he posed. Like, he would, kind of put his head back and smile. And I just found it really strange that he was so obsessed with having these pictures of himself. The one thing that he did express interest in was becoming an astronaut. We then go to Cape Canaveral, where he decides that he needs a picture of himself in an astronaut costume. I remember asking him, well, why do you need to do that if you're going to go to astronaut training? He was like, well, it's just a fun thing to do. After we were done with the photo session, he was very excited about the picture. He actually gave it to me as a gift.
On their first Valentine's Day in 2002, Jeff tells Jessica he wants to show her where he works.
Jeff said he had something really special planned for us, and we went from his apartment to the hospital. He seemed to have access to everywhere. He then proceeded to take me to the cadaver lab. He opened drawers with dead people, showed me different organs, and suddenly he ripped off the guy's arm and then chased me around the cadaver lab with it while he laughed maniacally. I was terrified, and he told me it wasn't a big deal. He asked me why I thought it was such a big deal.
When they return to his apartment, Jessica is furious.
I remember grabbing my bag and just telling him I was leaving, and he blocked the door. He wouldn't allow me to leave. It was just one of the first times I saw behind the mask.
Despite this deeply disturbing incident, Jessica and Jeff continue to see each other. And in the summer of 2003, Jessica graduates from Rutgers Law School.
I took time and did some research into where I might want to be. I ultimately ended up enlisting in the Navy as an intelligence specialist.
Over the next year, Jessica launches her new career as Jeff continues to serve the Navy and CIA in his undercover capacity.
He would be going off on what he called missions. He's playing me recordings of what he says are him interrogating terrorists in Afghanistan, and all I hear is screaming. He played those things for me pretty regularly. I was 24, 25, and at that age, I didn't have a lot of experience with the world. It seemed like, oh my gosh, I knew what the CIA was from movies and TV, and what he was telling me made sense.
Jessica thinks the pressure of Jeff's work or some unknown stressor is making him increasingly controlling.
He started isolating me from my friends, getting me to a point where I needed to rely on him for comfort, for friendship, because I just didn't have anyone else. Either I stopped talking to them or my life was just getting too crazy with him and they stopped talking to me. I came to think that this was just my life and something that I needed to deal with, because if I didn't, people were going to get hurt. He talked about killing people, so there was definitely a part of me that was quite sure he was capable of doing that to me or people I loved.
Jessica becomes scared in her relationship.
I just started looking for coping mechanisms. I would literally go to the gym and do an aerobics class and then run 10 miles a night. So I had an excuse to not be near him. I trained for a marathon so that I wouldn't be able to see him on weekends because I was just afraid.
After more than 2 years of dating, Jeff pops the question in April 2004.
You would think like getting engaged is supposed to be this like happy, exciting thing. But by the time that, he brought it up, I was already in that state of terror and fear that I didn't ever think I was going to get away from him. So I said, okay. And that was it.
But unbeknownst to Jessica, Jeff is leading a sinister double life.
I totally lost my 20s to this horrible, horrible person. And they're not something that I can ever get back.
After their engagement, Dr. Jeffrey Marsalis asks fiancée Jessica Rovell to accompany him on a trip out west.
His dad was his idol, so it was just a really big deal that I was going out to Park City, Utah to meet his dad. We went skiing, we went shopping. From what I recall, we did a lot of nice things on that trip. Seeing the normalcy of the family really made me question, like, where did he come from? Because they were just so kind and welcoming.
But it remains a stark contrast to Jeff's disturbing and frenetic energy.
He busts open the drawer and just starts screaming at me. He's got a shotgun and he's pointing it at me and he's just screaming, "I'm gonna kill you." When he was done screaming, he took a pause and he looked at me and said, "Just kidding," and turned around and pranced out of the bathroom. I think at that point, I was just so broken down. I let it go as one of those things that I needed to deal with in my life.
Back in Philadelphia, Jeff's abusive behavior continues.
I remember being on the phone with him, and I didn't care if he killed me. I didn't care if I lived. Like, I just couldn't deal with him anymore. And something just, clicked in my head. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And I hung up on him, and I immediately called 911 and said I needed help. I needed help. And as they were sending police over, I called my mom and I told her everything that was happening. And, it was kind of one of those, like, why didn't you tell us moments?
The police arrive and escort Jessica safely downtown to file a temporary restraining order.
It could have gone the wrong way any number of times. Handling it the way I did actually may have saved my life.
Soon, Jessica will learn that she is not alone, because Jeff's undercover work for the Navy and CIA has been a cover for something completely different.
It was March of 2004 when I began communicating with Jeffrey Marsalis. It was a time in my life where I was interested in getting married and having children.
Joanne Bottaro Cooper is single with a successful career in marketing when she decides to give online dating a try.
Jeffrey Marsalis' profile looked like he was a good catch. He had pictures of him in his medical scrubs with an astronaut's uniform. He had a lot of other pictures. Jeffrey said that he wanted to meet me out for a date, and I said yes. I lived in New Jersey, so he planned for me to come into Philly.
They go to a popular Irish bar in Philadelphia, the Tur Na Nog, where he describes his thriving career as an astronaut.
I was excited because he actually looked like his profile. As we were chatting and sat down at the bar, he started describing his residency program and the NASA program, and I was interested. He was interesting. He lived in a high-rise apartment building in the city that was also just a few blocks from where we were. So we went down to his apartment. He asked if I wanted a drink. I said no to an alcoholic drink. So I just wanted something non-alcoholic, whether it be water or soda. I sat down on the couch. We started to talk a little bit. He did kiss me. I then took a sip of the drink that was mine. And I don't remember anything until I woke up the next morning. I was in his bed. I had no clothes on. He was next to me. My head hurt. Every part of me hurt. I was violently ill. I knew I had sex with him. There was no question. But I didn't know why, because I had no intentions of staying over in his apartment, of having sex with him. I blacked out for probably about 8 hours. There's nothing in between my taking the sip of the drink and then waking up the next morning. I chalked it up to maybe not having enough to eat on Friday.
When Marsalis wakes up, his reaction seems to indicate nothing is amiss.
He started chatting with me like everything was normal, like what we did was normal, and I didn't say anything to him that I didn't remember anything. I just kept it all to myself. So I had assumed that I, wanted it, and I can't really explain it. I wish I could, but I can't explain it to myself. I just figured I would just forget about it. I was just gonna put it away and move on.
Over a year after Joanne dated Jeff, Jessica gets an unexpected call from the manager of his apartment building.
She called me and said, "Hey, I think you need to call the Philadelphia SBU." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Why? What happened?" And she said, just call them.
Jessica immediately reaches out.
I remember them asking me questions, and some of them were about him dating other people, and I had no idea.
The special agents tell Jessica that Jeff is accused of raping at least 2 women while she has been engaged to him.
At first, I don't know if I was in denial. I understood what my experience was, but as they were asking me questions about what sounded like the experiences of other women, it just, gosh, I don't even know how to explain it. There came a point when I was talking with the detectives that kind of a light bulb went off, and it all kind of came together. The last couple years of my life. were basically one big date rape. I came to understand that it wasn't just me, and that was just so scary.
I have to almost laugh at that. Let's get over the profile. And eventually we're gonna see me as the person who I am inside. The caring, the loving, the nurturing, the easygoing, the great guy.
In March 2005, Philadelphia's Special Victims Unit launches an investigation into Jeffrey Marsalis.
The first victim that came in said she had met him on a dating website. Well, they went out on a date. She said they had a couple drinks, went back to his apartment. She woke up with him on top of her. And then wake up the next morning, he kind of sweet talks her into like, hey, we were both drinking, we had a good time, we should go out again. And she did. But after he stopped talking to her, it was really bothering her. And she came in and made a report.
By this time, it's too late to conduct a rape kit or drug test on the victim. But police obtain a search warrant for Jeff's apartment.
The first time he's not home, so we go to the manager of the apartment complex.
When the building manager reads the search warrant, she is visibly distressed.
You can see the blood just like go like this, just go right off her face. And we looked at her, she says, he did the same thing to me. We went to search his apartment. Screensaver had CIA on it. He had a bulletproof vest there. He had a doctor's coat with his name on it.
They also find what appear to be classified CIA documents, all of which are later determined to be forgeries.
Mr. Marsalis was very good and very committed to pretending to be a doctor. And he convinced other doctors, other patients, other people in the hospital that he was Dr. Marsalis. He came from tremendous privilege. He was given the opportunity to go to a number of great schools, but by the time we encountered him, he was a nursing school dropout who went around lying about who he was and victimizing women.
What we found on his computer was a list that he kept. He called it the Yearly Calendar of Women. And that contained the first names of a number of women he had had sexual intercourse with.
They found a list of about 50 women.
We were shocked to learn that it wasn't 2 people who were raped by Marsalis or 3 or 4, but it was many, many women who were all victimized in the same way.
One of the names on the list is Joanne Bottaro Cooper.
Someone who worked for the assistant district attorney started to ask me if I knew Jeffrey Marsalis. She explained to me why they were calling me and what he was being investigated for. And at that moment, I had a flood of emotions. Everything that didn't make sense to me back in March of '04 came at me hard. I hung up the phone and I ran into the bathroom and I had an emotional breakdown.
Jeffrey Marsalis is arrested in April 2005, but makes bail and flees to his mother's condo in Utah. Jessica, Joanne, and a group of other victims work with police to prepare for trial.
We came up with a plan between the Philadelphia police detectives and FBI agents. Some of the victims were local, some were in the surrounding counties, some were in other states. And we started to slowly interview all of those individuals.
It becomes evident that none of the witnesses reported the rapes to police in a timely enough manner to conduct drug tests or a rape kit.
The investigation never identified the actual drug that he used. I think the strength of this case was the volume of victims who did not know one another, but yet their stories all were very similar.
The prosecutor chooses the 3 cases he will present at the trial.
I was a witness. They called me the glue that brought everything together. Because he was doing all of this while we were together, I was a baseline, the patient 0. He started with me and then just continued with these other women. We're all professional, successful women, just confident. And his mother is a strong woman, an educated woman, a confident woman, a successful woman. And it always struck me as bizarre that he chose his victims almost in the image of his mother.
The victims were very brave for being willing to share their story with the jury. Marsalis's defense attorney told the jury that the victims were lying and that this was all some kind of misunderstanding and that Marsalis was the real victim. Marsalis looked very smug and confident.
Their strategy was, he's a liar, he's not a doctor, he's not the things that he said he was, but he's not a rapist. These were women who were looking for, Prince Charming, and he's not that, so they're upset and they conspired together because they had seen him again and they had a consensual relationship that presented a challenge to get a successful prosecution.
In a controversial ABC interview with Marsalis, he reacts to their accusations of him lying about his profession.
The truth is simple. We had a great time. Had consensual sex numerous times with one another. If I'm such a god-awful person, why do you keep on hanging out with me for?
He's extremely excited by it, but he's excited by it because he is gaining control over somebody who he shouldn't be able to get control over. They shouldn't be easy targets. And so therefore, by going after them, he has gained control, and that level of control thrills him, excites him, and just pushes him to do it again and again and again.
At the trial, the defense lawyers adopt a familiar tactic, victim blaming.
What were you wearing? Why did you sleep with him? Why did you sleep with him again? Why did you go out with him again? So it becomes more a focus on the victim's morality, if you will, than it does about the individual, the accused's culpability in the situation. In Pennsylvania at the time, there was no mechanism for there to be psychological testimony as to why rape victims act the way they do in the wake of a sexual assault. And that was problematic because with the jury, the actions that a person takes afterwards are not always what you would expect.
While the jury takes 5 days to deliberate, the victims hold their collective breath.
The result came in, and it was an acquittal.
Let me make something very, very clear to you. I have never drugged anybody. I have never raped anybody. I've never forced myself on anybody, ever.
It was difficult to hear the verdict of not guilty with respect to those 3 women. What Marsalis didn't expect, what caused the smug look on his face to disappear, was when he was arrested in the courtroom for what was going to be a second trial with 7 different women presenting their story to a jury.
After his acquittal and rearrest, victims continue to come forward, and Jeff becomes the focus of a new investigation. But hidden from the proceedings, just 2 weeks prior to the Philadelphia trial, Jeff is living in Sun Valley, Idaho.
His family had some affiliation with this resort, and he got a job there as a security guard.
It's there in October 2005 that Marsalis and a female coworker share a few drinks after work. When she's suddenly unable to walk, he puts her in a taxi and takes her back to his place to repeat a familiar scenario. But this time, Jeff's tried and true technique backfires.
She was a lesbian, and she knew that she was not going to be sleeping with a man. So she knew that she woke up and it wasn't right.
She was not confused about what happened to her. And so because she went to the police right away, the detectives were able to get a rape kit, to get physical evidence proving what had happened. They were able to talk to the bartender who talked about the drinks that were served. They were able to find witnesses who had seen her being dragged out of a taxi cab by Marsalis. This was exactly the kind of evidence that we did not have in Pennsylvania because the victim came forward right away.
Now, with another trial pending in Idaho, Philadelphia law enforcement take Jeffrey Marsalis to trial for the second time in May 2007. The case focuses on 7 women, bringing a total of 66 charges, including rape.
One of the women lived in his building, and a woman who had met Marsalis on a date after coming into Philadelphia from New Jersey.
That woman is Joanne Butaro Cooper.
I gave my testimony, and I got to stare him straight in the face and point at him and accuse him of the crimes he committed against me. That felt very empowering. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. He saw me there, and his face dropped. It felt really good to know that someone could scare him a little bit still.
After deliberating a week, the jury finds Marsalis guilty on 2 counts of sexual assault and impersonating a government official, but without physical evidence, acquits him of all other charges.
They found him guilty of sexually assaulting 2 women.
I was surprised that the jury did not see the truth and that he wasn't convicted on all counts.
He's a felon now, and he will always have to register as a sex offender.
With Jeff finally behind bars, Jessica begins the difficult task of rebuilding her life.
With every moment that you are moving forward and putting it further in your rear view, I look at my own life, and there are some tough years. It's not something that you ever forget. Certainly, it's always there. It's possible to get to a point that it's not the sole influence in your life.
Despite not being found guilty of rape, Marsalis is given a new moniker in the press, the Match.com rapist. It's not until April 2009 that the Idaho case goes to trial.
The jury heard that Marsalis denied having had any kind of intercourse with the victim, and yet a rape kit that was performed showed that he was a liar.
I felt like she was the strongest. She did what all of us hadn't done.
As Jeff enters the court for sentencing, he notices Jessica sitting in the gallery.
He thought he was being smug and he was getting to me. But at the end of the day, my being able to look back at him and, really just signal to him what a dirtbag he is was satisfying and an opportunity to just take my power back, and I did.
After hearing all the evidence, the jury found Marsalis guilty of rape.
When it comes to sentencing, the judge is able to take the dozens of cases from Pennsylvania into account.
The outcome of the 3rd trial was the most satisfying of all of them.
I will sentence you to a term of life imprisonment in the Idaho State Penitentiary.
Jeffrey Marsalis is declared a sexually violent predator.
It was the moment in which I knew that it wasn't wrong. I knew that it was not real. And I'm glad I went to Idaho, because I don't know whether I'd have gotten that closure otherwise.
I questioned myself instead of him, and I will never do that again. And I will make sure that I can speak out and tell women that you should always believe yourself first.
Joanne starts a rape crisis counseling organization, and eventually, through a mutual friend, reconnects with an old boyfriend from college.
I've been married for 3.5 years. I'm extremely happy in my job. I work for a nonprofit, and I just continue to do things that make me happy.
Without the bravery of all the survivors in this case, he'd still be out there doing it.
Jeffrey Marsalis is, in fact, one of the worst serial rapists in Pennsylvania's history.
After the Marsalis case, rape trials in Pennsylvania will never be the same.
When victim after victim shared the same story, and Marsalis was still acquitted of rape, the Pennsylvania legislature responded by changing the law, which allowed expert testimony to come into rape cases so that jurors could better understand the psychology and behavior of rape victims.
I want to let others know that this is not going to define you for the rest of your lives. This is a moment in time, and it sucks. Like, it really, truly sucks. But you get past it.
Jessica goes on to become an intelligence officer in the Navy and spends 20 years working for the FBI.
I'm an investigator at Microsoft now. There are so many good things that have gone on in my life. I'm married. I have 2 amazing, silly dogs, and I've got relationships that are strong with my family, my friends. I talk with universities, with businesses, with government agencies. I want people to know you're not alone. You're not alone. And no matter what you think has been taken away from you, you have the power to grab it back.
Night falls fast in this town, as if someone pulls a blackout curtain across the prairie and leaves one light burning in a kitchen window no one dares approach. A dog barks, then thinks better of it. Cicadas drill the air like a warning siren stuck between notes. And somewhere off Farm to Market 2147, just past the rusted mailbox with no name, a sedan idles in the dark, engine ticking, headlights off, door ajar, a purse on the passenger seat like a heart set down and forgotten. The clock on the dash says 11:37 p.m. The date on the phone says June 10th, 2005. That phone will keep ringing through the small hours, vibrating in a cup holder no one will ever empty, racking up missed calls that later read like a countdown to something that can't be reversed. Cold case, mysterious disappearance, community shocked. A headline writes itself as if it were waiting in the weeds. She worked the late shift at the diner on Highway 79, coffee refills, pie wedges with their halo of canned cream, change counted neatly into the hands of drifters, ranchers, truckers, families with children who wrote their names in mustard on their plates. She laughed with a tired mouth and spoke with a soft correction that made liars tell better lies. Her name floats now like pollen, Elena. Elena of the name tag, of the habit of keeping a small spiral notebook in her apron where she wrote fragments, license plates, snatches of songs, a prayer for her brother overseas, the number 7 underlined twice, as if luck could be coaxed like a stray kitten to sip milk and stay. When the night manager watched her step into that sedan, silver, clean, easy to lose in a flood of lookalikes, he thought only of the drudgery of closing and the sound the neon sign makes when it chooses to live another day. He didn't notice the pickup that had been there for an hour, 2, headlights aimed at nothing, as patient as a fisherman waiting on a stubborn lake. The road from the diner to her rental is simple until it isn't. It unspools straight, then kinks through a stand of mesquite and dips by a dry creek bed, where the county never fixed a washout because the budget for fixing is always smaller than the budget for forgetting. Here, tires often crunch on gravel that doesn't belong to the road. Here, a lone shoe sometimes appears like a clue left by a fairy tale child who underestimated how much forest a story can grow. Here, rumor says, a man once parked to let his temper cool before driving back and telling the truth. Rumor is a local, born and raised. Rumor knows the fence lines, the locked gates, every camera that looks like it works but doesn't. By dawn on June 11th, the sedan sits where the night set it down. Dew beads on its hood like the town's unshed tears. A county deputy named Wallace swings off the highway and into the rutted pullout because something about the angle of the car disagrees with him. He walks up with that mixture of boredom and dread rural cops wear like a second uniform. He sees the purse. He sees the coffee-stained receipt poking from its mouth. He sees a single earring in the door pocket, a star that lost its sky. He swallows. He calls it in, his voice too steady to be honest. Within an hour, white SUVs and the old Crown Vic with the radio that speaks in bursts and static are lined up like teeth. They string tape. They photograph dirt. They lean on their heels and look at the creek bed as if it'll volunteer a confession. It does not. Inside the car, fingerprints smeared by fingerprint hunters. On the ground, footprints ruined by helpful boots. In the air, the wrong cologne, the crisp scent of something minty that doesn't belong to Elena, who wore drugstore floral and lived in its small garden. The notebook is missing, the phone is missing, the keys are not. The key ring dangles from the ignition as if the car itself is still undecided. Close the headline. Missing waitress, last seen leaving work, car found on a county road, no signs of struggle, no sign of her. The word signs becomes meaningless until it feels like a cruel joke. The first news truck arrives that afternoon, and a reporter learns the name of the deputy's dog because that's the only fact anyone is willing to give. The town rehearses its grief as if for a play that never opens. Posters on telephone poles, a candlelight vigil on the courthouse steps, A message board thread that starts with prayer hands and ends with poison. Secrets crackle. People see men in pickups everywhere. They see silver sedans that might be hers. They see Elena at the grocery store, then realize it's a different woman with the same tired grace. They see the creek rise in a sudden storm and think the water might carry an answer, silt in the shape of a message, and then they hate themselves for thinking it. The sheriff's office receives tips like spam, floods of "I know who did it," followed by stories that collapse under a single question. 2 weeks in, the case goes from urgent to organized. 3 months in, it goes from organized to routine. A year in, it goes from routine to dust, but not for everyone. There's a detective who learns the case file the way some people learn scripture. He came back to Texas after a messy exit from a bigger city where bodies were found, plural, where he slept under different neon. He's a standard issue silhouette. Divorce, old scar, the half-eaten pack of spearmint gum in his pocket like a rebuke to the past, and it's cigarettes. He hates the word closure. He hates the phrase no leads. He hates the way the word victim gets used like a sticker slapped on a person to warn others not to expect miracles. He drives that county road once a week, sometimes twice. He stands where the car was and tries to remember where the moon would have been the night it mattered. He counts the fences. He watches the dirt breathe under snakes. He speaks to ranchers who are older than fences and can hear a pickup coming by the argument of its pistons. He keeps a map. Red string would be cliché, but clichés are things that come back because they help. So he uses them, sorry and not sorry. The diner, the road, the creek, the old gravel pit where kids go to learn about danger because the classroom for that is never closed. The field where rumor claims someone saw something that someone else told someone about. He circles a name. A man who sat in the diner on Thursdays, 3 booths from the door, always leaves $2 under the salt shaker. Over tipper, fake contrition. The man wore a mint cologne too new for rural shelves. He drove a pickup that changed plates twice in a year. He had a knack for asking for Elena when he didn't need anything. He called her darlin', with a little slant like the word had an edge. The detective writes the name, then scratches it out because the alibi fits too well and witnesses are too ready. Slick alibis gleam like spilled oil. Rain makes them slide where you want them. He waits for rain. Years pass. The highway acquires a new overpass that confuses old men who just wanted to go to feed store and now find themselves orbiting a concrete planet that wasn't there yesterday. Children whose faces were on candles grow into teenagers who posture at the gravel pit and dare each other to stand in the dark where the road kinks. Elena's mother moves to a smaller place with quieter clocks, but every June 10 she bakes a pie and sets it in the window she doesn't approach, a ritual no one is brave enough to interrupt. The detective, his name doesn't matter to the town because the town still calls him the one who keeps asking, packs the file into cardboard when the sheriff retires and a new administration inherits old ghosts. He asks to keep working it. They say yes because saying no would feel like answering a door and closing it on a face you once kissed. Then a new word enters the lexicon like a lamp switched on in a room that's been waiting. Genealogical DNA, cold case, family trees. Third cousins once removed becoming bridges back to names you never learned to pronounce. In Dallas and Houston, and places the town only visits through televised trials, cases are cracking like old knuckles. One hair, one skin cell, one unthrown away cigarette pulled from a damp ditch, fed into machines that hum like softened thunder. Back in the county, the detective opens the evidence room with a key that sticks, and a prayer he never says aloud. He signs the log. He takes out a baggie. Inside, the earrings twin, the one recovered under the diner's 3rd booth during a renovation that happened years too late. On its back, a smudge, clear like betrayal. He seals it tighter. He calls a lab 100 miles away. He mails a small hope in a large envelope. He does not tell anyone. Waiting is its own crime. It steals hours and sells them back as sleeplessness. He keeps working the cases that have endings while this one keeps the town's lungs from fully inflating. Weeks, then months. The lab calls him like the dawn. First hint, then a line that splits the horizon. A partial profile. Not enough for CODIS to sing, enough for a genealogist to hum. They build backward, forward, sideways. They climb branches and find hollows. They find a family whose roots reach into a neighboring county, where a man of a certain age, with a certain service record, with a certain habit of changing plates, once owned a certain pickup. The detective's throat tightens without asking permission. He sees the Thursday booth lit up like it's finally giving testimony. He tastes spearmint. He writes the name again, the one he once scratched out. He doesn't move yet. He breathes. He rereads reports with new eyes. The night manager remembers the man's cologne, mint and expensive. A cashier remembers he paid cash with new bills that felt wrong, too clean, like money in a movie. A waitress remembers the way he watched the door, not her. His alibi hinged on a county fair photo with a date stamp. Digital cameras lie when you show them how. The detective finds the camera model, learns how the time can be wrong if you set it wrong, how the machine doesn't care about truth, it cares about settings. He tracks down the teenager who took the photo, now grown, now moved, now with a baby and a house and a job that has nothing to do with cameras. The file deepens. The ghost clears its throat. He drives out to a property with a gate chained but not locked, the kind of chain that says don't, but means if you do, at least pretend you tried not to. He walks the fence line with permission from a cousin who doesn't talk about the man unless it's raining. In the back acreage, near a stand of juniper that hides things without judgment, the ground dips and holds water longer than the surrounding earth. Dogs will tell you what the dirt won't, so he borrows noses from the city, leashed and eager, and they pull toward the dip with the urgency of good news that will hurt. Flags go in, small, bright, guilty. The county calls in a backhoe with teeth gentle enough to peel time. They scrape. They sift. They pull a scrap of fabric the color of a sky after a storm. They pull a tiny spiral of metal that once held a notebook together. The detective closes his eyes, opens them, does not allow relief to mix with sorrow. Relief is for endings. Sorrow is for everything else. He steps back. He sees the headline forming again, trying to decide how to split its shock between the past and the present. Cold case, 2005, break-in investigation, community bracing, strange clue resurfaces. He keeps his voice steady when he calls the town, the lab, the DA. He does not call Elena's mother yet. He wants to bring truth when he brings his face to her door. Truth is still suiting up. Truth still needs another test, another match, another piece of paper with numbers that mean what we need them to mean. Night falls fast again. The field exhales. Somewhere a storm breathes up from the gulf, deciding whether to visit. The detective sits on his hood with the dogs asleep at his boots and the backhoe idling like a large animal that understands ritual. He looks at the juniper, then at the sky. He listens. He can hear, if he is very quiet, the town stiffening, the neon deciding to live another day, the reporter practicing a phrase that will make strangers stop what they're doing and listen. And under it all, beneath the dry creek and the clatter of cicadas and the polite cough of engines idling outside houses where people don't yet know they're going to be asked for statements, he hears the hinge sound of a locked gate beginning to give, not with a snap, but with that slow, hard-earned creak that says, after 20 years, the door is not open, but it's no longer closed. The sun comes up thin and sharp, a blade laid flat along the horizon, and the field wears that colorless hour like a warning label you can't peel off. A blue tarp flaps, the backhoe coughs, the dogs watch with the resigned patience of professionals who know the hardest part isn't finding, but waiting for permission to call it found. The detective drinks lukewarm coffee that tastes like a parking lot after rain and stares at the flags marching in a crooked line across the damp dip, each one a whisper telling him to listen closer. He hears the story rearranging itself. Not a miracle, not even a breakthrough, just the case acknowledging his voice and answering in syllables the town can finally pronounce. He pockets the earrings twin again, not because he's superstitious, because he knows evidence can vanish twice. First into the moment, then into carelessness. Chain of custody is a liturgy. He calls the lab. He speaks in codes they share. Item recovered, suspected trace, extraction requested, priority high, family notification pending. The genealogist on the line sounds like a librarian who moonlights as a cartographer. Her sentence is precise, the rustle of paper like leaves moving on a map. She says the partial profile has sprouted new branches overnight. A second cousin in Abilene who doesn't know he's a compass. A grandmother whose obituary solved something without trying. The ghost of a surname peeking through 2 marriages and a hyphen nobody kept. She says, give me the day, maybe 2. He says, take what you need. We've already paid 20 years. He drives from the field to the diner because the route has become a rosary. The neon still pretends to be a halo. The coffee still thins itself to make everyone feel welcome. The booth where the twin earring hid its smudge is new now. Apple red vinyl that squeaks with the innocence of a second chance. The night manager is now the day manager, age turning his edges into the soft corners of a person who outlived a story and stuck around to count tips. He slides a plate over the counter, pie without flourish, and says, "You're back on Thursday business?" The detective nods. He asks again about the man with the mint cologne. Sometimes you ask the same question enough times and the answer remembers something it didn't the first 6. The manager wipes a clean counter anyway. He says the mint wasn't toothpaste, wasn't gum, wasn't candy. It was that expensive kind that comes in a bottle you could hurl through a window and it wouldn't break. He remembers because the smell had a chill to it, like the inside of a new freezer. Crisp, clinical, sure of its job. He says the man wore a cap with the logo peeled off and kept his right hand on the table like he had to keep it somewhere safe. He says Thursday nights, always. He says Elena called him sir, not hon, never darlin'. She had a good ear for boundaries, like a musician who can hear the key change before it lands. He drives by Elena's old rental. The porch has a new railing that doesn't remember the night her keys dangled from a car that couldn't decide what to do next. A wind chime imitates water. A young couple lives there now, and they don't know which floorboard creaks like a warning, so the house forgives them. He doesn't knock. He has learned that memory likes to be invited. It cracks the door on its own schedule. He takes the long way back to the office, past fields stubborn with mesquite, past billboards that sell luck by the foot, past the courthouse where the steps still hum with the candlelight vigil from 2 addresses ago, past the reporter who once learned his dog's name and now has a new microphone and the same eyes that know how to look sorry on camera. Inside the sheriff's office, the air is 2 degrees colder than honesty. A fresh sheriff sits behind a desk that still has the old sheriff's scratch under the top drawer where he tried to open it on a day it wouldn't. The fresh sheriff wants everything clean. Clean policies, clean carpets, clean language for messy histories. He asks how the field went. The detective lays out facts like a dealer fanning cards. Scrap of fabric, spiral of a notebook, canine alert, genealogical drift toward a surname he writes on a yellow pad and then sets his palm over because you don't let a rumor into the room until it knows where to sit. The sheriff nods like a man whose nods are recorded in minutes. He says keep going but keep quiet. He says the DA will want 2 nails and a screw and then another nail for luck. He says don't get cute with the press. He says we do not have the luxury of being wrong twice. The DA answers his phone on the second ring like always, voice made of coffee and calculus. He is a man who can look at a jury and see whether. He asks what part of the story can wear a badge yet. The detective says none of it and all of it, and the seam between those 2 distances is where he lives. The DA says bring me a link that doesn't snap when you tug it. The detective thinks of time, of how 20 years can corrode anything that isn't stubborn. He asks for a warrant for the property they touched with flags and care. The DA says, you're going to get me bones, or you're going to get me the absence of bones that will read like bones. He says, either way, you'd better get me the mint. He goes after the mint. He becomes a cologne scholar out of spite. Drugstore aisles, mail-order catalogs, the department store at the mall with its glittered air and salespeople who gaze at him as if he's shopping for forgiveness. He sniffs through a forest of artifices until his head hums and his tongue goes numb and the world tastes like green alcohol. He finds it not in a bottle, but in a name and a receipt in the diner's deposit records, a special order from a boutique in Austin, paid cash, picked up on a Thursday. The persona buys luxury to launder the ordinary of his life. The detective sketches a profile and hates himself for how easily he could be wrong. He calls Austin. The boutique laughs politely at the idea of digging through 2005, then finds an old binder because sometimes the world gifts you a box of antique puzzles just to keep you from going mean. They scan and send. A signature loops where a real name should be. A P.O. box glitters, newly relevant. The P.O. box belongs to a man who once lived near a county fair, owned a camera that lied because he told it to, and drove a pickup that swapped plates with the ease of birds changing branches. He doesn't arrest a picture, he arrests a person or he doesn't, so he circles back to that person's orbit. He finds a coworker turned ex-coworker who is newly willing to talk now that time has turned the present into another country. The man remembers the pickup had a dent on the passenger door like a knuckle, small and precise. He remembers the driver never parked straight, always a little crooked, as if he didn't believe in lines. He remembers mint. He remembers Thursdays, because Thursdays were for deliveries, and the driver liked to watch the road but not the traffic, as if he could tell the difference. The detective writes it down, not because the details will convict, but because the details are how he keeps his own faith from thinning out. A jury eats details. The truth deserves a feast. He looks at Deputy Wallace's original scene photos again and sees what he missed because he didn't yet know what to want. A smear on the inside of the sedan's glove box that might be nothing and might be the entire answer in the shape of a thumb he can finally shake hands with. The glove box was opened that night, maybe for registration, maybe for napkins, maybe for something that said, I was here and didn't plan to be seen. He sends the panel for reprocessing. New powders are meaner than the old ones, less forgiving, less likely to apologize for being thorough. A partial print appears the way a bruise does when you roll up a sleeve and tell the light to be honest. It is not enough to name. It is enough to flirt with a database that will later introduce itself properly. He knocks on a door he's knocked on before, the door of Elena's mother, the smaller place with the quieter clocks. She opens like a tired question. He doesn't say hope, he doesn't say news. He says he has work and so does she, and part of it is letting him take her cheek swab, and part of it is letting him sit at her table and listen to the quiet fuss of a house that wants him to step carefully. She allows both. She asks about the earring, not because a piece of jewelry matters more than a person, but because after 20 years a twin becomes a landmark, proof that the map still points somewhere. He tells her what he can without letting words outrun proof. She pours 2 glasses of water, and neither of them drink. When he leaves, she watches him cross to his car and notes the way he squares his shoulders before he gets in, like a man shouldering a door that has forgotten how. She decides to bake the pie early this year and puts a knife across the top before she sets it in the window. Superstition, protection, a slash through fate's neat little plans. The reporter with the trained, sorry eyes corners him outside the courthouse and asks for 3 sentences. He gives her none, and she fills the absence with B-roll. Fields, a diner, a creek bed that doesn't remember water. The message board resurrects itself, usernames from 2005 rising like ghosts who never learned new passwords. A user named Mintcut talks too much and gets banned by a moderator who has learned how to unplug pain for the night. The town stands on tiptoe. Preachers write sermons that pretend not to be about patience. At the gravel pit, the teenagers put away their bravado and go home before dark without knowing why their feet made the decision for them. Everyone brushes their teeth in extra time. Everyone breathes like the air is full of mint, and it might not be a sin to enjoy the sharpness. The genealogist calls at an hour that sits between tomorrow and now. She says the tree is pruned to a single branch with a name on it that rhymes with the suspect the detective wrote on his yellow pad and covered with his palm. She says the branch forks to 2 brothers, one dead, one alive, and the alive one has a son who once got a traffic ticket for running a stop sign near the county road where the sedan chose indecision. She says she can't tell him he has his man. She can tell him the family you're hunting grew up learning to keep quiet during storms. He thanks her in the flat voice of someone holding a glass brimming to the top. He hangs up. He puts his head on his desk. He smells paper and old air and the faint memory of a mint he hasn't chewed in a decade. He asks a judge for a warrant that reads like a biography of a field. Latitude, longitude, depth, the legal right to move time 1 shovel-thin layer at a time. He gets it because the judge also lives in this town, because judges read the newspaper even when they pretend they don't, because the law is not a stranger here. It comes to the high school football games and eats nachos from the booster club booth and goes home smelling like everyone else. He brings in an anthropologist who speaks the language of soil and a pathologist who can read history in the tilt of a bone. They excavate like midwives. They pull up a buckle that could belong to anyone who ever owned a belt. They pull up a button in a style a diner uniform would understand. They pull up a patience the town didn't know it still had. And finally, near the bottom, in a pocket of earth that held its breath for too long, they find what none of them say, what all of them recognize, what he will refuse to name until the lab writes it in numbers, fragments curled like commas, pausing a sentence that never ended. He signs another log, he watches the bag seal, he stares at the tape like it is the thin wall that stands between a promise and its echo. He drives the evidence himself because sometimes you have to carry the weight to count it honestly. The road to the lab is longer than it was yesterday. Every grain of asphalt has an opinion. He does not turn on the radio. He lets the hum of the tires edit his thoughts down to what he can say out loud when he gets there. Delivery from county, priority testing, compare to familial reference, chain intact. He hands it over. He signs again. His name looks strange in ink, like someone else trying it on. Back in town, the story leaks and drops you could count if you were inclined to a futile exercise. A woman at the post office says something about the property by the junipers. A man at the feed store says he saw county trucks near the fence. The reporter says sources confirm, and is careful not to confirm her sources. The sheriff says nothing. The DA says less. The detective walks through the quiet like a man underwater, ears full of heartbeat, vision narrowed to a path a person could follow if they were the kind to keep going. Elena's mother sets out 2 plates at dinner and then takes one away because she refuses to let hope make her cruel to herself. The teenagers go back to the gravel pit and swear at the stars because the universe refuses to act impressed. If the suspect feels pressure, he hides it under the same face he shows checkout clerks and neighbors and the cousin who doesn't talk about him unless it rains. He is older now, softer in the middle, a man you'd stand behind in line and forget an hour later. He buys toothpaste. He avoids cologne. He remembers the lesson the detective is banking on. People don't change so much as they learn to disguise their old selves in thrift store clothes. On Thursdays, he still drives. He still parks crooked. He still watches doors. He has a new pickup with plates that have yet to learn the habit of wandering. He thinks the past is a bad signal in a place with poor reception. He thinks wrong. Night again. The field remembers the weight of the day and lies down like a dog finally allowed to sleep. The detective parks by the rusted mailbox with no name and kills his lights. He listens to the creek bed make its dry noises, soft as paper, sure as breath. His phone sits face down. He can feel it thinking. He chews nothing and tastes mint and hates that memory gets to choose its flavors. He wonders which version of Elena lives in the town's head now, the one with the tray of coffee, the one with the spiral notebook, the one at the wheel with the clock insisting on 11:37, the one who never gets to grow a second version of herself. He knows that solved is a word that will feel both too big and too small when this ends. He practices it anyway, rolling it around until it loses its shine. He is not trying to be a hero, he is trying to be a hinge. The phone lights on its own, screen a small square moon, lab name, glowing like a verdict you can't read from across the room. He turns it over, he breathes. He listens as the voice on the other end says numbers first, because that is how you respect the dead and the living equally, by letting math carry the weight before language takes it. The match is statistically what you say when you mean this is not an accident. A family tree closes a loop. A name steps out of the shadow of suspicion and into the light of chargeable. He says thank you. He hangs up. He does not cheer. He does not cry. He starts the car. He points it toward town, where the neon will live another day, where a mother will hear a knock that finally brought facts with it, where a Thursday man will learn that time is not a straight road. It is a coil, and some hands know how to pull it tight until it clicks. Morning wears a badge. Paperwork wakes early. Warrants learn their verbs. The detective walks the corridor that smells like old carpet and new coffee and stops at the DA's door with the kind of knock that means we are done with, maybe. Inside, the air is quiet and math-shaped. They spread photographs and affidavits and the lab's clean numbers across the table until it looks like a city layout for a place where truth plans to live. The DA draws small squares in the margins. Seizure here, search there, arrest when the clock agrees. The detective talks through the hinges. Genealogical convergence, the P.O. box, the boutique receipt that shouldn't exist but does. The traffic ticket near the county road. The Thursday alibi that can't survive a clock set correctly. He saves the smallest proof for last because that is how you make people listen. Start with thunder, end with the lightning you kept under your tongue. The glove box print, rerun with new powders. A partial that flirted with databases until last night's phone call taught it how to speak, not a shout, a whisper that knows a name. The plan is old school with a modern edge. Trash pull first, curbside, unromantic, legal. The suspect lives in a rental with a stoop that pretends it has seen less. He sets his can out on Wednesdays because he is still loyal to the rhythm of municipal services even if he's betrayed every other rhythm a town teaches. A team rolls by in a pickup that's never worn a logo. They sweep the can like a stagehand clearing props. Coffee filter, plastic wrap with a thumb's worth of sweat, a water bottle with a lip print that thinks it's invisible. They bag the week's habits and drive them to a lab that doesn't even blink at the indignity of DNA turned into evidence by a man's thirst. The match stacks on the genealogy like a second story on a house that was always meant to be taller. The DA looks at the number, then at the detective. "All right," he says, like a gavel taking a breath. Surveillance is not glamorous, it's church for liars. They take turns sitting on a side street where the suspect's windows reflect wonky versions of the day. He comes and goes with an ordinary man's choreography. Work, errand, solo dinner at a place with a menu that never surprises anyone. One beer he doesn't finish, no one to talk to but the television. Thursdays that still pull him like tides. He buys toothpaste again, old habit gone theatrical. He glances at doors like they owe him respect. He parks crooked. He checks his mailbox like it might forgive him. He has no dog. He has no child. He has a routine polished down to the bone, the kind of life you can carry in your pocket. The detective watches and doesn't let hatred dress itself up as certainty. Certainty belongs to judges and juries. He's just a hinge, remember? But when the suspect wipes his mouth with the back of his hand and throws the napkin away, the detective's jaw tightens without his permission. He writes, "Thursday mannerism persists. Before they take him, there is a door the detective has to knock on, a door that knows the sound of bad tidings like a household smell." Elena's mother answers with that tired question still in her eyes, but today there's a steadiness underneath, a plank laid across a muddy place. He tells her they have a name, that the math respects it, that a judge signed a page and officers will carry it to a doorstep. He says the word arrest quietly and lets it land like something you set on the table and back away from. He does not say solved. He does not say closure. He says, there will be a hearing and you will not be alone in that room. She exhales like a tire giving up a nail. She thanks him without blessing him because she learned the difference long ago. Before he leaves, she asks if she should bake again on the 10th. He says yes, because ritual is how the living keep from floating off. They take him on a Thursday because poetry sometimes gets first pick. The suspect steps out of his door at 7:12 a.m., keys in right hand, phone in left, face arranged for whatever small negotiation the day might require. The team moves in as quiet as a change of weather. Sheriff's office. The badge flashes. The words line up. Warrant, hands where I can see them. Turn around. Palms flat on the hood of your pickup that never learned to park straight. He looks surprised the way men look surprised when a story catches up to them and doesn't ask for autographs. He starts with the script about misunderstanding, about rights, about lawyers he has the names of but not the numbers. The detective reads him his options in a calm that makes people decide what kind of liar they're going to be. Cuffs. Click. The min is gone from his life, but some ghosts are brand loyal. The cuffs smell like steel and old apologies. The interrogation room is the same in every county. Table that could be a coffin in a different context. Chair that squeaks like guilt pretending to be furniture. Camera red-eyed and sincere. The detective sits with the patience of a man who has timed his breath to long answers. The suspect sits with his lips pressed together as if he's trying not to spill. Counsel is on the way. The detective talks anyway because silence often needs a shape to outline. He narrates the Thursday habits, the boutique order that should have left no trail and did, the county fair camera that told the wrong time because someone taught it to. He narrates the glove box, the partial print, the water bottle that gave up more than thirst. He never says, "We know you did it." He says, "You were there." The suspect's eyes flinch, quick as a rabbit. He asks for a lawyer, and the detective nods like a man who respects doors closed properly. He stands. He leaves the room with the slow deliberation of someone unscrewing a jar with both hands. Outside, the hallway hums. The DA wants bones dressed in language. The sheriff wants deputies dressed in professionalism. The reporter wants quotes dressed in hurt. The detective wants to sit in his car and stare at the steering wheel until it tells him the next step. There is still the property to go through inch by inch. There is still the back acreage by the junipers to reconcile with maps and permits. There is still the spiral of the notebook and the button and the buckle to teach a jury how to listen. There is still, always, the mother. He calls her. He says the thing he is finally allowed to say. We've made an arrest. He hears the silence on the line perform a dozen emotions and land on a quiet he has never heard from her before. "All right," she says, copying the DA without knowing it. "All right." The search team swarms the suspect's current home with latex fingers and small lights. Drawers yawn, cabinets confess. In a shoebox under a bed, a handful of receipts that survived 2 moves, 3 jobs, and a scrubbing that wasn't thorough enough. The boutique again, the P.O. box, a service record with dates and places that don't align with the alibi's pretend schedule, a torn photograph where a right hand is visible on a diner table, fingers curled as if protecting something hot. A box of spiral notebooks that aren't Elena's, but one spiral is bent in that exact way the fragment recovered in the field was bent, a coincidence the detective refuses to allow. He photographs everything as if he's writing with light because that is exactly what he is doing. In the garage, an old license plate wrapped in a shop rag that smells like grease and half lies. On the plate, a faint smear of the same powder that once flirted with the glove box. He smiles without joy. He bags without comment. In the trunk of an old footlocker, he finds a single earring, not a star. A stud, simple, sharp, not Elena's, not anyone they know, but suddenly the room is full of ears and none of them are hearing well. The detective writes, "Pattern, souvenir behavior implied, corroborate with timeline and known victims." He hates that note. He hates what it suggests about escalations in practice and people who learn the wrong lessons too quickly. He sends the stud to the lab anyway, because the worst stories do not end when you want them to. They end when the stubborn last page agrees to turn. The suspect's attorney arrives with a look that could crack stone. He files motions. He says words like contamination, circumstantial, overreach. The judge schedules a hearing. The courthouse hallways fill with the particular electricity of a town that has been keeping its breath in a jar for 2 decades and is suddenly told to exhale on cue. The reporter's eyes learn a slightly different way to look sorry, one that includes relief trying not to dress as triumph. The message board resurrects again. The username's older now, the argument's exactly the same, the moderator's sharper with the plug. Someone posts a grainy picture of Elena at the diner, and the comments section bows its head like a congregation at the precise moment in the hymn when 8 goes quiet. At night, the detective returns to the county road because that is where his sentences start and end. He pulls over near the rusted mailbox with no name and steps out into a dark that feels professional, not personal. The creek bed whispers paper. The mesquite keeps its counsel. He walks the kink in the asphalt like a man relearning steps to an old dance. He stands in the place where the sedan waited, door ajar, purse a heart set down and forgotten, keys undecided. He talks to no one and to everyone. To Elena's memory, to the mother's pie cooling with a knife across its top, to Deputy Wallace's dog, who is bones now and still the best at waiting, to the teenagers who finally go home before the stars start making jokes. He thanks them for their patience, as if patience were a person who could accept a compliment. When the sun rises on arraignment day, it brings that thin blade again, laid along the horizon, sharp, fair. The courtroom is not large enough to hold everything people bring into it. The suspect stands with a lawyer's words pinned to his chest like medals that don't belong to him. He pleads the way the guilty and innocent both plead at first. Predictable syllables, a posture borrowed from other men. The DA reads facts as if intoning a weather report that has finally learned how to be specific. The detective sits behind him, a hinge in a suit, and stares at a knot in the wooden rail until it looks like a small map of a place where roads don't get lost. Elena's mother sits with her hands folded like prayer without the performance. The judge's gavel is not a drum, it is a ruler drawing a line. After, the town exhales in shards. Some cry, some cheer, some go to work on time because not all rituals are optional. The diner pours coffee that tastes almost sweet. The neon flickers and decides, as always, to live another day. The detective stops by the counter but doesn't sit. The day manager slides a slice of pie toward him for once with flourish, as if the plate itself is a headline. "On the house," he says. The detective nods. He doesn't eat. He boxes it and carries it like evidence, careful, precise, aware that sugar can be a sacrament when grief needs something to do with its hands. That night he can't sleep, so he goes to the office and opens the box that holds the earliest reports. He reads the first page Deputy Wallace ever wrote on this case, the one that starts with a time and a place and the word purse, and then keeps going because the world forced it to. He finds a note in his own handwriting from a year later that reads, "Mint, Thursdays. Watch the door, not her." He adds a new note under it, "Hinge turned." He closes the file and doesn't lock it because unsolved or solved, this story still owns the room. The lab will send more numbers. The field will give up another small truth tomorrow, or it won't. The trial will ask the town to sit very still and listen without interrupting. He will keep time. He will count breaths. He will escort each piece of evidence to the witness stand like he is walking someone down an aisle. And if the word closure tries to get in, he will meet it at the door and remind it that the living and the dead prefer accuracy to comfort. Outside, cicadas drill the air like a warning siren stuck between notes. A dog barks, then thinks better of it. Night pulls the blackout curtain again, but this time a second kitchen window glows somewhere beyond the juniper stand, a new light in a place that once swallowed bulbs whole. The detective stands in the doorway and watches it, hands in pockets, breath steady, mint a ghost that finally leaves the room when asked. Tomorrow, motions. Next week, testimony. After that, a verdict with sharp edges. For tonight, the hinge holds. The door, which was not open, which was no longer closed, has learned to swing. The town tries on normal like an old jacket and finds a nail still hidden in the lining. Arraignment fades into a weekday that pretends to be ordinary, but streetlights feel taller, and conversations take detours to avoid the words everyone is thinking. The detective maps the next stretch of road on a whiteboard that has been wiped so many times it looks haunted by old plans. Trial prep is a factory with the lights always on. Chain of custody diagrams that braid like river water, timelines hammered straight, witnesses sanded down to their clearest truth. Every page wants a staple, every staple wants a reason. The DA calls a meeting that sounds like a drum roll. Paper piles, names, exhibits numbered until the numbers behave. The anthropologist talks soil like a physician talks blood. Layers, intrusion, a wound to the earth teaching us the date it learned to hold its breath. The pathologist's voice is a rail line, no curves, no detours, fracture patterns, post-mortem interval bounded by what roots did and did not do, the tiny betrayals, mineralization records when time runs out. The genealogist joins by speakerphone, her vowels precise. The family tree now a clean ladder with one rung that squeaks. The suspect's branch. She keeps her language math-shaped because juries like numbers the way drought likes rain. They practice a choreography of explanation. This leads to that leads to him. Then practice it again with half the words, because in court you lift the story with your bones, not your breath. The defense files a motion to suppress, a small parade of words that try to convince the judge the Thursday trash never reached the curb, that the curb wasn't a curb, that the can was a castle. The judge is a carpenter with sentences for tools. He measures each board, squints, and cuts. Motion denied. Another motion says the glove box print is a flirtation, not a marriage. The DA smiles without showing teeth and slides a supplemental lab report across the table. A newer algorithm polishing old partials into sharper edges, a probability that wears a badge. The defense sighs like a tire losing air in a parking lot you can see from the courtroom window. They float a phantom, an alternate suspect made from gossip and the human urge to build straw men just to practice lighting matches. The phantom is a drifter who never bought mint and didn't know Thursdays. The judge nods politely at the ghost and sets it back outside. The detective returns to the field with the anthropologist at dawn because sometimes a second look is the key you thought you lost in another room. The juniper stand holds its breath. They string new lines, mark new squares, and go shallower than shallow, lifting the last crumbs of a story they refuse to leave unfinished. A coin surfaces, warped into an ellipse by pressure and time, the date half vanished but legible enough to bracket the night in question. A zipper tooth emerges, singular, unglamorous, undeniable. Same make as the uniform issued to diner staff that year, a manufacturer's tiny stamp whispering the month the batch was born. He photographs it, hand steady, heart loud. He thinks of Elena's spiral notebook, the one she used to write license plates and prayers. He carries the zipper tooth like a syllable he's not yet ready to say aloud. Witnesses multiply like weather. The night manager, now a study in guilt management, a waitress who left the county and learned how to swallow memory without choking. A cashier from the boutique in Austin who never forgot the man who bought expensive mint with hands that didn't look like they belonged to a man who bought expensive things. The detective rehearses them for the stand, not to change the tune, only to tune the instrument. He tells them where to look, how to pace, when to breathe. He reminds each, answer the question asked, not the one you wish had been asked. He writes on his pad, keep it boring. Juries love boring that becomes inevitable. A box arrives from a storage facility with a rental contract signed in the suspect's looping half name. Inside, a faded tarp with a tear that matches a shape found in the dirt, a coil of nylon rope that remembers knots the way skin remembers rings, a gas receipt from a station along Highway 79 time-stamped 11:12 p.m. on June 10, 2005. The receipt presses hotly through the years like a handprint on glass. The detective builds a clock. Diner shift ends, sedan leaves, Highway 79, gas stop, creek dip, juniper, silence. He pins each minute like an insect and refuses to look away from the wriggle. He visits the county fairground, off-season empty, the tilt-a-whirl parked like a sleeping animal, lights dim to the melancholy of a closed eyelid. The photograph that defended the suspect for 20 years, 2 smiling faces, a date stamp in the bottom right corner boasting innocence, gets a second trial. The detective finds the teenage photographer again, now older, now comfortable with the truth a camera hid. They power up the old model, dig into the menu no one ever needed until a town did, and pull the log of settings. The camera's clock was set wrong by 3 hours that summer because someone thought daylight saving was optional. He documents it like you'd document a sunrise. Slow, exact, grateful. The defense watches him work through windows that admit only rumor. They hire an expert who talks about transfer and touch DNA like fairy dust, about contamination as a religion, about numbers that mean less than they look. The DA counters with a lab tech who has never met a number she couldn't teach to stand straighter. The judge asks both to explain it as if to a smart child. They oblige. The courtroom learns words it will never use again. The detective writes, translate everything. There is a night he drives to the suspect's childhood street in the neighboring county, not to knock, not to ask, just to see the local weather that raised a Thursday habit. The house wears its porch like a chin held too high. He sits with the engine off and listens to sprinklers gossip, to a train confide its schedule, to a woman down the block call a cat that doesn't come. He imagines a boy learning to watch doors instead of faces, learning that silence is currency, learning that Thursday is a road if you drive it enough. He hates the sympathy trying to sneak into his spine and shakes it off. Understanding is not forgiving. Understanding is a tool, nothing more. Back at the office, a letter waits from a county 2 over, a missing person report from 2003 that hummed like a bad omen and then went quiet. A waitress, another diner, another highway, no car, no purse, no field. The detective feels the floor tilt a degree he cannot afford. He forwards the stud earring found in the suspect's footlocker with a note that does not breathe. The lab will tell him if this cold thread wants to braid into his rope. He hopes and does not hope. He writes in small letters, keep your grip. The town remembers how to smile in daylight again, a little. School starts. The marching band practices a song that has no patience for sorrow. The feed store sells out of something it always sells out of. The message board bans a user who insists the real killer is a politician from another state. The reporter does a stand-up piece from the creek bed and keeps her sad eyes honest. Elena's mother bakes and doesn't put the knife across the top this time, just lets the pie be a pie and a prayer be a prayer. She meets the detective at the courthouse steps and hands him a slice wrapped in wax paper. He takes it like a document that needs signing. He eats it in his car, the sugar a useful kind of ache. Jury selection becomes a small theater. People arrive wearing opinions like shirts with slogans. The DA and defense take turns peeling away those slogans to find where the cotton thins. Do you read message boards? Do you believe science is a person or a process? Can you say reasonable doubt without turning it into impossible certainty? The detective watches faces and tries to guess who talks to their neighbors and who talks only to themselves. 12 and 2 wake up out of the crowd, ordinary as rain, and agree to sit still through a story that has learned to walk. A plea offer sneaks into the hallway like a stray cat. Lesser count, time that pretends to be mercy, no admission the town can frame and hang on a wall. The DA looks at the detective. The detective looks at Elena's mother. She shakes her head once, not unkind, but with the force of a person who has learned the weight and distribution of her own grief. The cat wanders off, the hallway exhales. They will try this case like they built it, hinge by hinge, inch by inch, number by number, Thursday by Thursday. The night before opening statements, the detective can't sleep again, so he drives the route the sedan tried to complete. He passes the diner. The neon blinks and decides yes. He passes the gas station. A kid in a hoodie sweeps the lot, bored and alive. He passes the county road. The rusted mailbox with no name tries out a new shade of rust in the moonlight. He stops at the kink where the asphalt dips its shoulder. He gets out as if his boots could memorize something he might need on the stand. The air smells like mesquite arithmetic and distant rain thinking about it. He hears the creek bed whisper paper again. He stands a while. He thanks nothing in particular. He gets back in and rehearses, out loud, the words he knows the DA will ask him to say. What you saw, what you did, what you logged, what you learned, what you never forgot. Morning is a courtroom fluorescent, no romance, just clarity. The DA's opening is a clean spine, a woman gone, a car waiting, a county that remembered, a science that matured, a habit that betrayed its owner, a field that kept its promise to speak when spoken to properly. The defense's opening is a soft rain on a tin roof. Doubt, 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 each drop a suggestion that the sound is the storm. The detective takes the stand after lunch, the jury's eyes measuring him like a fence line. He tells it straight. Deputy Wallace's call, the purse on the passenger seat, the earring, the spiral, the backhoe's patience, the mint advancing through years like a persistent ghost. He says genealogy and hears 12 pens write it down. He says trash pull and watches no one flinch. He says glove box and partial in probability, then translates until the numbers sit down and behave like sentences. Cross-examination slants the light. The defense tries to make him the story, his scar, his divorce, his map with strings, his decision to stand at the creek bed at night and listen to dirt. He answers without decoration. He refuses to be interesting. He turns every question into the case and refuses to visit himself. He draws small boxes around each uncertainty and labels them honestly. He does not pretend the door swung open by itself. He just shows them the hinge. In the gallery, Elena's mother holds the wax paper from yesterday's pie like a talisman and watches the jurors the way a farmer watches a sky that won't decide. The reporter keeps her eyes quiet and her notes loud. The teenagers from the gravel pit sit in the back and do not whisper. The suspect stares at a knot in the rail and tries to convince it he is the main character. The knot refuses the opportunity. When the day ends, the hallway fills with the awkward grace of people leaving a church where the sermon gave them homework. The detective places his palm against the cool courthouse wall and feels, for a second, the faintest tremor, maybe air conditioning, maybe the building remembering other trials, other hinges. Outside, the sun is an ember in the cotton of a sky starting to fray. He drives home past the field. The juniper stand keeps its counsel. The mailbox with no name lets a moth rest. Somewhere behind him, in a lab with the lights never off, the stud earring from the footlocker is making up its mind about whether it belongs to a story that isn't his to tell yet. He turns onto his street. The house is soft with supper and television, pulls into his driveway, and sits with the engine off, hands quiet on the wheel, listening to the little clicks and cooling sighs, the car's small, honest noises after a hard day. Tomorrow, more testimony. Tomorrow, the anthropologist will translate dirt into dates. Tomorrow the town will practice the art of stillness again. Tonight, the hinge holds. The door moves a fraction more. The second day of testimony begins with Dirt learning English. The anthropologist stands where witnesses stand and lifts the field onto the record grain by grain, voice steady as a metronome. She explains the seams of soil like a tailor pointing out hidden stitches. This layer undisturbed since rain meant something else. This layer sliced, folded, pressed. A wound that time tried to scab. She lays a photograph on the easel. Quadrant flags, string lines. The juniper stand keeping its counsel in the background like a parishioner who never misses a Sunday. She traces a neat rectangle in red grease pencil and says, "Here the soil compacted a decade and 2 summers ago. Here the roots in this corner grew crooked because they took the shape of a thing they could not digest." The jury leans forward as if the map could speak when the expert rests. The DA asks the question he's rehearsed to sound like fresh curiosity. Can soil lie? Not well, she says, and the phrase lands with a thud soft as a shovel biting loam. She talks about transfer and pressure, about the faint imprint of fabric weave pressed into silt like braille, about beetle patterns that write calendars only careful people can read. The defense rises with a smile sharpened for cross and tries to pitch the ground into speculation to inflate the nothing around the something. Are you certain? Could it be? Might the rectangle mean? The anthropologist chooses her verbs like a mason chooses stones. The rectangle is intrusion. The timing is bounded by rainfall data and a roots ring diary. Certainty is a word for churches. Science uses probability like a ruler. The jurors take notes as if their pencils could sew the seam themselves. Then the pathologist, a human clock that tells time in quiet anatomies, unspools the condition of what was found. She refuses to name and respects the room for needing that refusal. She points to fracture lines that speak of pressure, says the word perimortem, and translates it into the language of the living. The breaks occurred around the time life left, not after. She holds up a zipper tooth in a small, clear bag and reads its manufacturer's mark as if it were scripture. She describes how mineral takes up residence in bone when years pass, a tendency that can be dated. She shows a graph and apologizes to no one for numbers that calm more than they confuse. The defense presses on the fog. Could stray construction have caused? Could animal activity? Could we be importing meaning? She answers without edge. Construction leaves a signature. Animals have opinions, the ground knows how to report. Meaning is the last thing we add after we finish measuring. And then the boutique cashier, flown in from Austin and surprised to find her life suddenly pulled taut against a headline, tells the jury about the Thursday man who bought a bottle that cost too much to smell like clean. She remembers because cash buyers at a luxury counter write themselves on your day, posture like borrowed confidence, a P.O. box instead of a house, a thank you delivered through teeth that wanted to keep the word inside. She produces the old binder they found in their stockroom, a plastic sleeve with a receipt scabbed to it by time, the suspect's half-name looped in a practiced hand. The DA walks it to the jurors like a priest walking an offering. The defense objects, foundation, hearsay, the usual liturgy, and the judge hears, measures, and overrules with a sentence that could cut glass. The detective returns to the stand to stitch transitions. He relives the trash pull without apology, tells the room about the bottle lip with skin cells that worried more about thirst than privacy, the coffee filter that betrayed a morning, the math that agreed with the tree the genealogist tended until a single branch bore a name. He refuses drama. He refuses to make himself a character. He lays times on the record. 11:12 p.m., gas receipt. 11:37 p.m., dash clock in the abandoned sedan. 11:51 p.m., neighbor reports a pickup idling like a bored bull near the creek dip. His phrase, the neighbor's memory kept honest. He lists the findings at the property and refuses to imagine aloud. He is a hinge. He does not swing wider than the door. Cross comes like a cool knife. The defense asks about tunnel vision, about the detective's map of red string, about every Thursday he spent alone on a county road practicing the art of obsession. They bring up a complaint filed 5 years ago by a man who did not like being asked a third time where he was on a night that had become holy. They ask why other leads were abandoned, why rumor was treated like a local with privileges. The detective lets the questions stack and answers each without performing a rebuttal. He says when you chase a ghost, you can't give every shadow equal credit. He says the map had string because lives have lines. He says he stood on that road because the case lived there, not because he did. At lunch, the courthouse breathes out and takes a sandwich. The reporter does a quick stand-up under a live truck's mast, eyes gentle and sentences careful, reminding no one and everyone that trials are not movies. Elena's mother sits on the bench outside Department C with the pie dish empty in her lap like a returned library book, and looks at the sky as if weather could pick sides. A teenager from the gravel pit brings her a bottle of water and doesn't say a word. The town keeps learning its new manners. Back in session, the glove box becomes a stage. A technician shows the panel under magnification, the swirled ridges fluorescing like a galaxy coaxed into focus. She explains algorithmic enhancement, how yesterday's partial can learn to say yes to today. She cross-references the trash pull profile and the suspect's booking swab, dresses the numbers in their right suit, and sends them to introduce themselves to the jury. A probability that laughs at coincidence, a paternity of presence. The defense tries to drag the print back to flirtation. The technician refuses gently, with the tenacity of a person who believes accuracy is a form of love. The judge breaks early for the day, schedules, calendars, the human need to go home and watch something uncomplicated on television. The detective steps out into the late light and the courthouse stairs feel steeper, as if justice had gained weight. His phone is waiting like a held breath. A message from the lab, different case number, the stud earring from the footlocker finally ready to declare itself. He listens in the shade where he can hear numbers properly. Partial female profile, insufficient for a single source ID, sufficient to exclude Elena, sufficient to map near a missing waitress from 2003 in a county 2 over whose file still smells like rain never fell. The detective writes the name from that old report on his pad, the ink sinking deeper than usual. He doesn't tell the DA yet. He doesn't put a second ghost in a courtroom with only enough seats for one. He files it in the part of his chest where anchors live. He intends to tell the mother when there's something to hold, not when there's something to fear. Night tastes like metal. He drives the route again because ritual is a staircase that leads you back to yourself. The diner's neon chooses life. The gas station hums. The creek bed whispers paper, the same syllables rearranged into new caution. He thinks about the suspect in County Orange, about men in cells learning to become small so doors can contain them. He wonders whether the mint haunts the suspect too, a smell he cannot wear anymore, a ghost he cannot stop inventing. He leaves that thought on the shoulder and drives on. The next morning brings the boutique's bookkeeper, hands inked with old account ledgers, delighting in the precise boredom of records. She points to the P.O. box, to a later purchase of the same scent months after the arrest window, to a pattern of Thursdays paid in cash that arranged themselves like fence posts across a summer. The defense tries to snip the wire. So what if a man smells expensive? The jury glances at the detective as if to say, we know what we just learned. You don't have to glue it for us. Then the night manager from the diner, his guilt braided neat, tells his timeline again but sharper, the memory burnished by repetition to the kind of honesty that holds up in fluorescent light. He recalls the suspect's cap with the logo peeled away, the right hand kept flat on the table, the way Elena said sir and not hun. He admits what he missed, the pickup idling, the Thursday routine agreed upon by chance and choice. He looks at Elena's mother when he says he's sorry and does not expect forgiveness to be a bird that lands. He sits, smaller and more square at once. The DA introduces a map of cell pings, a scatterplot without romance. The suspect's phone touches towers that night like a blind man touching a wall. Here, then the black wedge where signals hesitate, the county road's soft Bermuda Triangle. The defense points to gaps as if gaps were proof of innocence. The DA points to context because context is what gaps build their houses on. When court breaks for afternoon motions, the defense tries a last-minute thunderclap, a motion in limine to keep out the boutique, to keep out the glove box, to keep out the trash that tells secrets. The judge listens, folds his hands in a cathedral of fingers, and denies with the steadiness of a carpenter, satisfied with his joints. He reminds both that the jury is the instrument, not the music. Outside, clouds muscle in from the west, their bellies full of held-back weather. The reporter tilts her face toward them like a person willing to be rained on. The message board bans another ghost. The teenagers from the gravel pit sit on the courthouse steps and talk about how quiet everything got back when the sedan waited with its door ajar, and neither remembers if they are repeating their parents or inventing it fresh. The detective stands under the portico and looks at his hands as if a confession might collect there by accident. Late that day, the DA brings the coin and the zipper tooth into the narrative with the carefulness of a man threading a needle in a moving truck. The manufacturer's mark, the batch month, the uniform order records from the diner's wholesaler, paper that smells like basements and guarantees and something stubbornly like truth. The defense tries to call it coincidence, and the courtroom hears the word echo and know how coincidence tires out under weight. Elena's mother takes the stand just long enough to teach the room the sound of a grace that refuses performance. She identifies the uniform order sheet in a small, practical way, says, yes, that's mine, yes, we ordered that size that month, yes, we kept the extras in the back, no, we never got the missing ones back, yes, my daughter wrote license plates in a spiral notebook because the world sometimes improves if you write it down. The DA does not let grief do extra labor. He thanks her and sits her down. The defense has no questions and for once means it. When the judge releases the room, dusk is leaning hard. The detective drives home by the long way again, the road like a sentence that refuses a period. The lab calls one more time with the kind of footnote that rewires a paragraph. The glove box partial, when paired with the trash pull DNA and the booking swab, yields a combined statistic that moves from persuasive to brutal, one in a number that sounds like a joke about stars. He writes the ratio, stares at the zeros until they look like fence loops on a ranch too big for one man to ride. He texts the DA a single word, reinforced. At home, he stands in his kitchen without turning on a light and listens to the refrigerator hum, to his own breath correct its tempo, to silence turning pages. He pulls the file from his battered briefcase and adds a note that feels like a prayer. The ground told the truth, the math translated, the hinge held. Across town, Elena's mother rinses the pie dish, dries it, sets it upside down like a promise kept where anyone can see it. In county lockup, the suspect stares at the cinder block wall the way a man might stare into a creek at night, hoping the water tells him he is not the shape it takes to get around him. Tomorrow, closing arguments rehearse their weather. The DA's spine straight and spare, the defense's rein careful and relentless. Tomorrow, the jury goes to a small room and teaches itself to breathe as one. Tomorrow, the town will decide whether normal finally fits without the hidden nail. Tonight, the courthouse windows go dark in sequence, like eyes learning to close, and the juniper stand out by the field counts something only trees know how to count. Rings, storms, ghosts, and the long, unglamorous arithmetic that turns a headline into a sentence with an ending. The road to the diner cools under the blacktop's thin skin. The rusted mailbox with no name accepts a moth as if it were mail. The creek bed writes its paper song again. And the detective, sitting at his table with the room's small, unheroic noises doing their jobs, practices the word that still feels too big and too small, solved, then sets it down and decides to pick it up again only when 12 strangers agree to help him carry it. Morning arrives without ceremony and drags the courthouse lights on like a stagehand, tired of applause. Closing day. The hallway smells like copier heat and rain waiting its turn. The detective slicks a palm across the whiteboard one last time, even though the jurors will never see it again. He pockets his pen as if it were a key. The DA brushes a crumb from his tie, checks the order of exhibits, and commits to a spine. No poetry, no fireworks, just the weather report you can plan your life around. The defense paces a small loop and files their edges to the legal equivalent of a whisper. The judge enters with the soft thunder of robes. The calendar looks up and decides to hold still. The DA stands and keeps his voice low, as if raising it might scare the story away. He walks the jury down the road one more time. 11:12, gas receipt. 11:37 dash clock. 11:51, board bull engine by the creek dip. The glove box whispering its print. The trash pull choosing science over shame. The juniper stand recording intrusion like a ledger. The boutique's binder remembering cash Thursdays in a P.O. box instead of a porch. He does not reach for adjectives. He lets the nouns work. He lays the spiral's bent tooth beside the footlocker's bent tooth and asks them to see the family resemblance. He tells them how roots curve around the wrong thing when time gives them no better option, how soil doesn't lie well, how probability is not a magic trick but a ruler with numbers that don't care who you invite to dinner. He points to the suspect only when he must and never pauses for effect. He closes with a sentence that lands like a ledger closing. When a dozen small truths agree, they become one large truth. Thank you. The defense rises and brings rain. Not a storm, not a flood, just a steady percussion on tin that makes you think about flaw and error. They say contamination as if it were a lullaby. They say transfer with the calm of someone finding glitter on a sleeve after a party they didn't attend. They say coincidence slow and patient until it feels like a cousin of fate. They draw a silhouette of alternate, a drifter built from rumor and distance, a camera clock set wrong by innocence, a mint buyer who enjoyed pretending to be rich because sometimes men do that. They invoke reasonable doubt the way a careful hand tests a doorknob, gently, repeatedly. They tell the jury that science is powerful and power always needs a leash. They tell the jury that the glove box flirted, it never kissed. They end by pointing at the blank places in maps and insisting the blankness is the point. The DA declines rebuttal flare. He simply returns to the smallest part, the zipper tooth, and holds it up without holding it up. Words only. One manufacturer's mark, one batch month, one uniform order. Dirt that remembers fabric like a palm remembers a familiar face. He sits. The jury stands. The judge chants the instructions like scripture with verbs. Presume, consider, weigh, dismiss, decide. Words line up like fence posts along a pasture the town has paced for 20 years. Jurors nod. Some swallow. One, in the second row, squares her shoulders as if bracing to lift a couch. Deliberation room, a rectangle with a table and a history. 12 people step in as strangers who shared a story and let the door close with that hushed gravity you get when decisions change shapes beyond the walls that hear them made. They take seats like musical chairs after the music stops. 3 on one side, 3 on the other, 4 at the long stretch, 2 at the head. They choose a 4-person without drama, a man who runs a hardware store and believes in measuring twice. They lay out the exhibits like a picnic no one is hungry for. They start with the rule they were given. Beyond a reasonable doubt is not beyond all doubt. It's beyond doubt that keeps a decent person awake at night. They say it aloud to hear it behave. The detective stays put in a hallway that forgets how to be long. He's past pacing, past coffee, past the urge to check his watch. Time is a drum in the next room beating without him. The DA leans in a doorway and stares at a scuff on the floor. A comet made by a dolly 100 trials ago and now a superstition. The reporter scripts nothing yet, eyes steady, fingertips soft against a notebook that learned her pressure years ago. Elena's mother doesn't sit. She stands at a window where clouds stage rehearsals and refuses to guess which way the wind will commit. Inside the jury room, juror number 7 opens with the glove box. She draws the partials path across paper with her finger. Old powder, new algorithm, booking swab, trash pull. She doesn't say destiny, she says math. Juror number 3 pushes back with the boutique, the P.O. box, the cash Thursdays. Why is expensive smell a rope? Juror 9 answers, it isn't, not alone. It's a knot that ties to other knots. They talk through soil, through roots that learned to bend, through beetles that kept time better than men. They talk through the gas station at 11:12 and the dash clock at 11:37 and the idling engine at 11:51, 3 stones laid across a creek, each steady enough to plant a foot. They talk about the drifter silhouette the defense conjured. They look for shadow where a body should be and come up with air. They talk about Elena's sir, about Thursday habits, about the way people polish routines until they can see their face in them. Hour 1 becomes hour 2. Outside, rain finally votes and begins. Slow drops, fat with rehearsal. The courthouse windows turn the weather into a soft film. The detective walks to the vending machine and buys nothing. The DA checks his phone and finds no new law invented in the last 5 minutes. The reporter interviews the damp about its plans. Elena's mother unwraps nothing from her purse and rewraps it, a ritual that calms the fingers and refuses to name itself. In the room, they take a straw vote. 9 for guilty, 3 for not yet. The 4-person doesn't flinch. Not yet is just a room where no is still unpacking. The 3 ask to walk backward through the timeline without the DA's hand on their elbow. They pull the gas receipt out of the air. He had to be somewhere at 11:12, but lots of men pump gas. They put it down. They pull the dash clock, 11:37, a car waiting like a faithful dog, but clocks are dumb if someone sets them wrong. They put it down. They pull the bored bull engine at 11:51. Could have been any pickup, but the road is not generous with traffic at that hour. They put it down. Then the glove box whisper, the mint Thursdays, the boutique binder, the P.O. box again. One of the 3 says coincidence and watches the word try to hold that much weight. It squats, it groans, it resets its stance, it fails. They go to the zipper tooth. The metaphor writes itself, a tooth that belongs where it was found only if the universe enjoys neatness. Juror 4, the geometry teacher, draws a line on a scrap and labels points. Manufacturer, batch month, wholesaler, diner order, uniform issue, field recovery. We're not guessing, she says, as if describing a proof to students. We're measuring. One of the holdouts nods with her chin, half yes, half please, keep going. They visit the genealogist's tree, careful with the idea that blood is not destiny, but it is a map. And some maps are kinder than others. They compare the trash pull DNA to the booking swab and watch the zeros stack like dominoes that will not fall until they're ready. Juror 8, who fixes engines for a living, mentions tolerances. You can be off by a hair and the machine still runs. These numbers don't allow that hair. He looks at his hands as if the grease from yesterday might volunteer a lesson. They return to the defense's reign. Reasonable doubt, not improbable doubt, not pretend doubt. The foreperson doesn't preach, he inventories. Is it reasonable to believe an innocent man's partial print ended up in a glove box of a car belonging to a woman he expected to see on Thursdays, on a night her car sat at the kink where he liked to idle? Is it reasonable to believe expensive mint and a P.O., box and cash and a cap with the logo peeled off and a right hand held flat on a table are just quirks with no teaching power? Is it reasonable to believe the soil lied skillfully, the roots learned deceit, the beetles forgot their calendars, the coin warped itself to match a pressure that never happened? 12 people sit with those questions until the chairs creak. Hour 3 snaps into hour 4. The rain steadies. The courthouse custodian puts yellow cones near the slick tile and whispers to them like pets. The detective stares at the blank white of a wall until it offers him nothing, which is what he wanted. The DA writes a text to his wife and erases it because he has learned not to throw promises at weather. The reporter files a short piece with no adjectives, a rarity she allows herself like a good luck charm. Elena's mother stands because sitting would give the nervousness a lap. In the room, a holdout folds. "It's the hinge," she says, surprising herself with the detective's word. "We keep opening the door, and everything we see is the same room." The second holdout lingers on the absence of a body's full accounting. No name piece, no ID with a photograph, no singular object the television shows you when it wants to make conviction taste simple. Juror 5, the nurse, says softly that in a body there are 100 small truths, and you don't need each one to perform to know what the whole means. She points at the pathologist's chart without the chart present and speaks of fracture patterns like weather, of mineral tendency like rent paid on time. The holdout breathes and nods. 11. The last is stubborn on principle. Someone must be. He hates the glove box, the idea that something so small could carry so far. He hates the idea that trash can judge. He wants a confession so he can sleep. He wants a camera businesslike and honest. He wants a sentence that clicks. Juror 2, the florist, tells him sometimes the arrangement only looks right when you stop trying to make one flower do all the work. She says you didn't love the glove box. Fine. Love the field, love the zipper tooth, love the coin, love Thursday. He almost smiles. He looks down at his hands and sees they stopped shaking 2 hours ago. "All right," he says, copying the town's favorite compromise. 12. They knock. The bailiff's face learns relief like a new word. The judge takes the bench. The gallery fills with the choreography of people who have practiced this moment in their heads for years without staging it once in their bodies. The detective takes a breath that does not shout. The DA looks at the scuffed comet and forgives it for being small. The reporter's eyes settle into the shape they always take at this hour, respect lined with fear of getting the words wrong. Elena's mother finds her seat and sets both hands on her knees, ready to hold still. The foreperson passes the paper. The clerk reads, "Words are simple because they have to be. Count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty." The room doesn't break, it exhales, a long collective surrender of air held in barns, in kitchens, in bedrooms, in patrol cars, in pews, in booths where pie arrives without flourish. The suspect reacts with the bewilderment of a man who thought the past was a drunk storyteller no one would believe. He looks smaller in orange than he looked in the diner, than he looked in his pickup with the crooked park. The defense places a hand on his arm because that is what you do. The DA's lips lose a line he forgot he held. The detective doesn't move. Hinges do not celebrate. They work. Elena's mother stands without wobbling. She closes her eyes, not to cry. She did that on nights with no witnesses, but to mark the moment like a notch on a doorframe. When she opens them, she finds the detective and nods the kind of nod people use at gravesites when the words have all been spent properly. They do not hug. They do not say closure. They share the practical agreement of people who learn to tell time by the same distant train. Outside, thunder mutters, satisfied. The judge schedules sentencing. The courtroom empties in that sleepy stream that follows adrenaline. The reporter breathes and allows herself one sentence she will cut later. The DA shakes the detective's hand once, efficiently. "Good work," he says, meaning all the years it took to be the temperature of this room. The detective says, "The ground did most of it." They both know what he means. The anthropologist stands in the aisle and looks at the jurors filing past with an affection that feels like having colleagues for a day. The technician texts a photo of the glove box print enhancement to her wife with a heart she will also, later, delete. The night manager from the diner sits in the back and cries into his hands because now his apology has somewhere to live. Outside, rain is honest. It hammers the courthouse steps clean and gives the town the dignity of wet hair. The neon at the diner flickers, then commits. The kids at the gravel pit go home early, not because they are scared, but because their feet have decided to take mercy on their hearts. The message board explodes, then moderates itself into a community bulletin and a recipe for pie someone swears is Elena's favorite. The P.O. box sits empty and undecorated, a square of nothing surrounded by numbers that belong to other lives. The detective drives the long way. Ritual doesn't retire just because a verdict showed up on time. He passes the gas station. The kid in the hoodie is off. A woman in a yellow raincoat mops and sways to a song only she can hear. He passes the rusted mailbox with no name and considers, absurdly, painting "thank you" on its side. He doesn't. He stops at the kink and lets the wipers sketch their rhythm across the windshield. The creek bed sings louder now, paper turned to drum. He steps out into the rain because some gratitude prefers to be wet. He stands where the sedan once waited and lets the water erase him into the scene, a man-shaped gap filled and filled again by weather. He thinks the word solved and does not say it out loud. Back home, he sets the file on his table and pulls out a clean sheet. He writes the date. He writes the case name the town taught him to whisper. He writes verdict and draws a small box next to it. He checks it. Then he writes a second name, the one the lab whispered about, the 2003 waitress 2 counties over, and he draws a second box. He does not check it. He circles it once, then a second time, the ink darkening into intention. He is not finished. Hinges live to swing again. In lockup, the suspect stares at walls that never learned how to return faces. Somewhere inside a cotton jumpsuit, a man tries out stories to tell himself that will make sleep consider him. Mint will not visit. Thursday will not save. The field will dream without him, and the juniper will keep its count. At a kitchen table across town, Elena's mother slides a pie into the oven without a knife laid across, the way she used to when joy did not require protection. She turns on the small radio that plays country at a volume gentle enough for grief and begins to set 2 plates out of habit, then stops, then keeps going anyway. Ritual is how the living stay put. The town settles into an exhausted kind of quiet, the kind you hear after sirens stand down. The courthouse shines damp under street lamps. The reporter goes back to the office and writes the version people deserve. Spare, exact, with the adjectives left on the cutting room floor like confetti from a party no one throws this time. The DA drives home through puddles that hold small, perfect copies of the world in their skin. The anthropologist rinses soil from her boots and speaks a thank you to the ground out loud, embarrassed and satisfied. The detective sits on his couch and finally eats the slice of pie he carried too long, the sugar patient, the crust humble, the cinnamon generous. He tastes memory, he tastes work, he tastes rain. When he closes his eyes, he does not see the glove box or the juniper or the binder or the dash clock. He sees a hinge, polished by use, smooth with time, doing the small, precise, sacred job it was made for, helping a door remember how to move. Tomorrow, sentencing. Tomorrow, paperwork with corners sharp enough to nick a thumb. Tomorrow, a call to another county about a stud earring and a waitress their weather forgot. Tonight, solved is a word he lets sit on the table without handcuffs. Tonight, the town sleeps under rain that took 20 years to arrive and spills itself without asking permission, washing the road, the mailbox, the creek bed, the steps, the neon, the roof of Elena's mother's house, washing everything a little closer to clean, never to perfect, never to new, just to the honest middle where true sentences live. Sentencing day walks in without a tie, all business in its sleeves. The courthouse breathes that pre-storm hush, a quiet you can fold and put in your pocket. The detective finds his usual spot against the cool wall outside Department C and counts the little things. Scuff comet on the floor, busted baseboard by the drinking fountain, the way the fluorescent hum trembles when the AC kicks. He doesn't need to be here, not by the book. But the book doesn't know about hinges, and hinges don't miss the moment a door chooses which room it belongs to. The DA arrives with the tidy gravity of a man who knows how to place a word where it will bear weight. The defense drifts in with paperwork like umbrellas, ready to stand under necessary rain. The suspect walks in shackled to yesterday. Orange finds a way to look smaller under courtroom lights. Victim impact statements turn the air personal. Elena's mother steps up in clothes that know how to stand in front of strangers. She doesn't make the room do the work. She has carried her own for 20 years and isn't about to outsource today. She tells the judge about a pie recipe with outside edges that prefer a blister, about a spiral notebook with prayers tucked between license plates, about a kitchen window that learned to glow without being looked at. She does not point at the suspect. She points at time. She says, "We kept breathing one breath at a time." The courtroom practices the art of silence. Even the reporter writes slower. A former co-worker speaks, one of the Thursday waitresses, the word "sir" catching as it leaves her mouth like a bead snagging on cloth. A deputy reads the part of Deputy Wallace's first report that never made the paper, the sentence that admitted fear without naming it. A teenager from the gravel pit, no longer a teenager, says he stopped going out there at night after seeing the sedan with the door ajar, not because of ghosts, because of responsibility he didn't have words for yet. The anthology of grief closes soft. The judge nods, a carpenter measuring twice. He reads the numbers like they are measurements, not punishment. The math lands, years stack, parole keeps its distance. The suspect flinches only when the cuffs regain him. Routine refuses to be personal. Outside, the town exhale sounds less like relief and more like an old house settling. The DA answers 3 questions and refuses the 4th. The defense says the word appeal with the resigned professionalism of a firefighter packing hose after the water's done its sermon. The reporter's camera winks out. Elena's mother steps into the light like someone exiting a long hallway, pupils cautious, posture correct, hands empty on purpose. The detective walks with her to the top of the steps and stops. They look down at the town that pretends nothing happened and overachieves. She says, "Thank you for not quitting when the story got bored." He says, "It never did," and hears the lie only after he's said it. Boredom is a kind of weather, and he sat through it like everyone else. The file does not close, it changes weight. Back at the office, the cardboard edges have learned his fingerprints too well. He writes a new label in small, careful letters because neatness is the only rebellion he can afford. Adjudicated. He slides it into the row where solved lives, then hesitates, pulls it back half an inch, like a man holding a door for someone who hasn't arrived. He opens a different box, the one with the stud earring from the Foot Locker that doesn't belong to Elena, the letter from a county 2 over, the missing waitress from 2003 whose picture looks like every late shift that ever existed. Hair up, smile competent, eyes already at the next table. He writes her name once, then again, watching the letters steady. He drives to that county without sirens, without telling anyone, because sometimes you have to walk into a room without a trumpet and ask the furniture what it remembers. The sheriff there is new old, the kind of man who keeps a globe on his desk he never spins. They sit like men comparing maps. The detective lays his on the table, stud earring, partial female profile, a boutique receipt's habit of surviving when better things don't. Thursdays like fence posts in a summer that won't answer questions. The sheriff lays his a night shift that went silent, no car, no field, a rumor about a pickup that idled like a man practicing patience where patience wasn't needed. They agree on a verb, look. He stops at the old diner that used to be that diner and finds a menu trying to pretend history is just a synonym for our famous. The counter tile remembers shoe soles. A woman behind the register inherits the habit of noticing and tells him, without being asked, that on Thursdays a man with a cap and a mint that wasn't toothpaste used to sit 3 stools from the door and order coffee he didn't drink. She remembers the cap's peeled logo. She remembers cash. She remembers a P.O. box printed on a delivery slip that shouldn't have carried a P.O. box. She doesn't remember his license plate. She remembers the way his truck never parked straight. The detective nods. The hinge sounds familiar. The lab calls with a footnote that refuses to stay small. The partial female profile from the stud earring intersects a family line the genealogist had flagged in pencil, a faint path. Not enough to arrest, enough to respect. It doesn't match the missing waitress outright. It doesn't belong to Elena. It belongs near. Near is a cruel word that does not apologize. He drives home with Near sitting in the passenger seat like a passenger who doesn't shut up. He doesn't turn on the radio. He lets the traffic lights edit his breathing. At night, he walks the county road where his case learned to breathe and lets the dark practice its craft. No neon tonight. A short power cut turned the diner's halo into a rumor. The creek bed doesn't whisper paper. It mutters like an old man who forgot he was talking. The rusted mailbox with no name glistens from the last honest rain, and for a second he believes he can smell mint again, canned chill, clean without kindness. He stands at the kink and says nothing because some prayers prefer quiet lips. He files paperwork the next morning like a man moving grain, steady, repetitive, necessary. The DA signs off on requests to open channels with the neighboring county. The genealogist gets a polite email that sounds like a summons without the badge. The anthropologist writes back faster than anyone, says she's willing to walk any field that thinks it has an ending hiding under it. The reporter leaves a message on his phone that is half question, half grace. If there's another family who needs a door, let me know which side to stand on. He pulls Deputy Wallace's old photographs again. Not the creek bed, the glove box, the earring's twin. No, a detail hidden in clutter. A crumpled receipt from a convenience store 2 towns over, time-stamped at 10:34 p.m. June 10th, 2005, the Inca ghost refusing to go. He missed it because it didn't know it wanted to be important yet. He blows the dust off with his breath like a birthday wish and logs it like a promise. The Thursday man's route might have started earlier than the road admits. He visits Elena's mother because courtrooms take energy and energy takes rituals, and rituals work better when shared. She's not baking today. She's rearranging the silence, moving chairs as if angles can alter memory. He tells her about sentencing without adjectives. He tells her about the other county without suggesting a shape. She nods at both and then, unprompted, hands him a small box of index cards bound in elastic. Elena's old notebook entries copied clean years back on a night the house felt like it needed fresh script. Plates, descriptions, phrases that read like a woman trying to teach herself how to keep chaos at bay with ink. On one card, Thursday man, right hand flat, mint, cap without brand, truck crooked. On another, a P.O. Box half written, then scratched out as if someone interrupted her or she interrupted herself. He thanks her like a man receiving a blueprint. The suspect's appeal lands with the flat note of paperwork that will take its time under lights that never mimic the sun. The defense argues algorithm, transfer, coincidence, the greatest hits. The appellate court takes it in, like a lake takes stones. Ripples, then calm. The detective doesn't wait for the echo. He is busy with near. He sits in a borrowed conference room with the new old sheriff and covers a whiteboard with nouns, studs, binders, booths, caps, P.O. boxes, Thursdays. He circles the word roots. Men like this do not teleport. They commute between habits. Where were his gas stations in 2003? Where did expensive smell get bought when Austin was a day trip, not a detour? Which county roads kink the same way? A map blossoms on the table, its creases like veins. They lay petro receipts, what they have, what they can beg, across it like a net. A clerk in a storage facility, charmed by courtesy and a story she remembers from the news, lets them page through monthly ledgers that still smell like dust and why keep this. There's a line item for a box rented in 2003, 3 towns east, under a half name that rhymes with the suspects. There's a second for a month in 2004 that canceled itself too quickly. Half names are a habit that only looks clever in rear view. They stack copies, they bag them like fresh air. At dusk, the reporter stands near the courthouse steps and reports nothing about the new work because she knows when to sit on her hands. She speaks instead of sentencing, of a town's ritual of returning to normal without promising it'll stay. She does not say closure, she does not say healing, she says sentence and years, and the mother spoke, and lets the anchors insert their own weather metaphors. People at home watch, nod, turn to their stoves, lift lids off pots, taste salt, add a pinch, move on. The town is practicing its future in little motions. The detective drives to a small bridge in the neighboring county where water actually runs. Different creek, same sound pitched lower, a baritone paper song punched with frogs. He leans on the rail and lets the night audition as a witness. A truck passes, not crooked, not Thursday, just a truck doing its life. Somewhere a dog corrects itself and quits barking. He remembers the first time he stood at the 2005 kink before he learned how to ask the ground polite questions. He says out loud to the water, "Teach me again." Morning lifts like a paper shade. He's back at a lab counter, new case number, familiar hum. The technician who once made a galaxy out of a glove box partial wears the same patience. She taps the stud earrings report with a careful finger. We can ladder this with genealogical assist and build outward. It's not a straight path, he says. Straight roads bore me. She smiles without wasting time. Samples queue. Forms get signatures. A number he learned to trust warms up. The DA gives him a look that reads like a blessing and a caution. Finish one story without dropping the next. He says he will. He means it. He lives in the hinge. He can hold 2 doors ajar without getting clever. He calls the genealogist. Her voice over the line still sounds like maps turning pages. She says she'll need 6 things he can probably get, and 3 he'll have to coax out of reluctant clerks who dislike visitors from other counties. He thanks her with a tone that understands we're all clerks of something. Elena's mother leaves a pie on her window without the knife, without ceremony, just pastry cooling under morning like a quiet bell. She writes a short note, not to anyone in particular, and tucks it under the dish towel. For the officers who keep time. A patrol car glides by like a tired fish and then returns, slow, curious, grateful. 2 slices disappear in polite bites. Sugar does its job where language can't. The rusted mailbox with no name gets a coat of rain-polished shine when a late shower throws itself at the road for 5 honest minutes and quits. The diner's neon blinks, hesitates, decides, lives. The teenagers, now adult enough to forget being teenagers, meet for coffee and talk about mortgages with the same intensity they used to reserve for ghost stories. The message board posts a long thread titled, "What Justice Tastes Like," and, mercifully, it devolves into recipes. Someone asks for Elena's crust. Someone says there are some things you aren't allowed to copy. The detective ends the day at his table with the two files open like twin lungs, one full of verdict, one full of near. He writes notes in a hand that betrays how much coffee he didn't drink. He lists Thursdays from 2003 he can account for and Thursdays he can't. He writes the missing waitress's name again and again until the ink learns her shape. He draws the crooked park symbol on the margin and circles it. He writes mint with a question mark that knows the answer. He writes cap, logo peeled, and underlines it twice, not because it proves anything, because it keeps him in the right weather. He stands, stretches, watches the kitchen window for a second like a man listening for a train that might not run tonight. He rinses his cup, dries it, sets it down, mouth up, ready, unafraid. He thinks of the field and the juniper counting rings. He thinks of the glove box and the coin and the zipper tooth, those blunt little profits. He thinks of the suspect boxed in concrete math and the appeal that will spend years learning how to be politely denied. He thinks of the other county and the stud earring whispering near like a tide licking a shoreline it fully intends to claim. He turns off the light. The room folds into a quieter geometry. In the dark, his house makes small, honest noises. The refrigerator's sermon, the AC's sigh, the tick of something cooling from trying too hard. He lies down. He does not sleep quickly. Across town, a mother closes a window because a breeze carried the clatter of a truck passing 2 streets over, and she decided to choose quiet for once. At the diner, the night manager counts the till and writes on a fresh slip of paper a number with 2 lines under it, Habit Grove Deep. At the creek, the 2005 ditch, the 2003 bridge, water and not water rehearse their roles. The hinge holds, the door stays busy. Somewhere out beyond the edges where maps get shy, a man who once wore mint and called himself Thursday tries to dream a different story and finds the plot won't let him. In here, in the room with the files and the ink and the ritual, the detective builds another weather report with nouns, numbers, patience, and the quiet kind of faith that sits on the passenger seat and refuses to buckle, even when the road kinks. The morning after Near refuses to sit still, the detective wakes before the alarm and lets the house keep its small, honest noises without competition. Coffee earns its keep. A notepad takes a breath. He writes the missing waitress's name at the top like a heading he intends to obey, and draws a line beneath it straight as a ruler laid across a heartbeat. The 2003 file from the neighboring county is thinner than history deserves. Lost car, absent purse, a half-done map of places she used to go when time still behaved. He thumbs the stud earrings report again. Partial female profile, a family line warmed but not lit, a chain tugging from 2 different shores. Near keeps tapping his shoulder like an impatient friend. He lets it. By 9, he's parked in front of a DMV that looks like patience learned to dress itself in plastic chairs. Clerks become cartographers when you ask them right. He asks them right. The suspect's half-name trails through registrations that never belonged to him but visited. Short leases, borrowed plates, a truck that wore different numbers the way seasons wear different skies. 2003 puts him inside this county like a nail that never goes flush. A mailbox off a frontage road. A P.O. box that exchanged gossip with a postmaster who remembers the way some people ask for packages, eyes open too wide, a smile practiced to please no one in particular. He writes it all down like coordinates he'll need when the weather turns. The neighboring sheriff assigns him a desk, the size of a promise, and a deputy with a forehead that favors skepticism. They go through the old evidence like cousins arguing over inherited furniture. A paper bag from the 2003 diner has survived, grease ghosted across its bottom, a thumbprint smudged near the fold that never learned the trick of turning into numbers. He asked the lab to flirt with it anyway. New powders learned new manners while the town slept. A lost and found box yields a bent cap logo peeled from fabric 2 decades ago and saved for no good reason. The deputy laughs and then stops laughing. The detective photographs it, partially ashamed of believing in small theatrics and partially grateful they exist. They visit the 2003 diner in its latest incarnation, retro pretending to be original. The counter remembers elbows. A cook remembers the waitress's smile as something competent, a tool, not a trap. A regular remembers a man who never finished his coffee and kept his right hand on the counter like a pet. The register remembers cash. The ceiling remembers a leak that came back every April regardless of repairs. He walks the parking lot and lets the asphalt tell him what cars taught it. Angles, habits, those little vanities of people who always park nose in or always reverse like they expect to leave in a hurry. He finds tire ruts near the back where gravel meets grass and thinks of the 2005 county road, the bored bull idling, the faithful wrongness of a crooked park. Patterns are not proof, he reminds himself. Patterns are the weather map. Proof is rain hitting your face. He eats a sandwich with the sheriff in a conference room that smells like old coffee and new cold cuts and builds a clock out loud because saying times in order can sometimes conjure their shape. In June 2003, the waitress's last shift ended at 11 o'clock. A camera on the liquor store 2 doors down caught nothing because it always caught nothing unless a brawl asked for fame. The highway had no eyes. The bridge where water actually runs remembers only fish. He redraws Thursdays in the margins, half ritual, half trap, and realizes they need someone else's memory to wake this one up. He drives to a storage facility 2 towns east, the kind with corrugated doors that look like a line of hesitant mouths. The clerk remembers kindness because he brought her donuts last time, and she remembers that because kindness is a rarity you inventory. She lets him page through ledgers that were supposed to be digitized and never met the deadline. There it is. A unit rented for 3 months in 2003 under a half name, with a phone number that rings now to a disconnected Psi, Unit 17C. The contract calls it climate-controlled, and the detective calls it a room where a story chose to cool itself. He gets a warrant. He gets bolt cutters. He gets a whiff of what people put away when they want to be the kind of person who doesn't keep that sort of thing around. Inside, dust with opinions, a footlocker that complains about being moved, a box of receipts for oil changes that happened right on time. Some men maintain machines like altar boys. A bundle of napkins folded into precise squares, stains like small arguments. He bags each without giving adjectives the microphone. In the bottom of a banker's box, a plastic sleeve from a boutique in Austin, the same brand that sold expensive clean to a man in love with Thursday. The receipt is missing. The pattern isn't. He inventories the shape of absence and calls it a fact. On his way out, he notices Unit 18C's door paint worn at chest height in a smile of scuffs. The clerk says it belonged to a family who kept Christmas in cardboard and a broken drum kit that practiced hope. He nods, amused by how evidence rooms and holiday storage overlap, both packed with what people can't bring themselves to throw out, both smelling like memory's attic. Back in the neighboring sheriff's office, the genealogist's voice arrives through the phone like a careful breeze. She has lived with the stud earrings partial profile long enough to teach it manners and friends. She says the family line brushes a branch where a woman adopted out in 1975 had 2 daughters who drifted south, one of them, maybe, waiting tables in 2003 under a borrowed last name. She says she can't confirm without saliva or luck. He says he can try for both. She asks about permission, about ethics braided with grief. He says he was raised to ask the living before he asks their history. They agree on decency like a contract and hang up needing the other to succeed. He finds the sister in a town where Main Street still fights the bypass. She works at a shop that sells feed and fishing licenses and a little mercy if you catch her on a good day. He introduces the case like a heavy box he's willing to carry back out if she says no. She looks at the stud earrings photo and inhales like a person remembering more oxygen than they asked for. She says her sister loves studs because dangly things got in the way of trays. She says Thursdays were good tip nights. She says she'll swab if he promises to say please to her sister's memory. He promises. The swab feels ceremonial and ordinary at once. He thanks her in the doorway and leaves with a small tube that hopes to grow up into a sentence. The lab turns the tube into numbers and calls back with the kind of voice you use when the floor just got steadier. A near match, a half-sisterly echo, enough to build a bridge with an engineer's confidence, but not enough to invite the whole town yet. He adds a notch to the whiteboard in the borrowed room. He writes 2003 waitress bigger. He underlines it with the calm of a man who knows new hinges need gentle pressure and time. He drives the route she might have taken home that June night, touches each intersection like you touch a fence post, checking for rot. He stops at the small bridge at midnight and listens. Trucks pass like large thoughts refusing to share. Frogs audition for a choir. Water carries the gossip of gravel. He leans into the rail and asks the darkness politely if it remembers a pickup that never learned to park straight. The darkness refuses to answer, but a shape of an idea arrives anyway. The suspect learned to rehearse. He practiced the same choreography, finish the night, buy expensive clean, watch a door, keep the right hand flat, leave cash, drive crooked, and a town without cameras left him alone with his routine. Routine is a religion that baptizes with boredom. The reporter calls and doesn't press. She asks how you take your coffee now that you don't smoke. He says the same way as always, hot, no miracles. She laughs and tells him to let her know when Near picks a side. He says he will. He means it. A week daisy chains into 2 and the 2003 file fattens like bread dough. The anthropologist walks a field outside the diner's back lot just to be thorough and finds only patience, which is something. Deputy skepticism gradually becomes deputy respect, which is also something. The neighboring sheriff learns the trick of waiting without fidgeting. The DA watches from his side of the county line without poaching, without preaching, a man who knows the rhythm of another town's drum and lets it pick the next beat. Then a small luck arrives disguised as garbage, a box of old VHS tapes from a pawn shop 3 towns away, dumped by a landlord cleaning a unit that has finally quit resisting. A label in ballpoint says Fair 2003 and nothing else. He borrows a VCR like a relic and feeds the tape in with the reverence of a priest. Wobble, snow, then carnival lights blinking like anxious thoughts. Tilt-a-whirl, Ferris wheel, a crowd that is always everyone you ever knew and no one at all. A camera pans and, for a breath, catches a man in a cap with the logo peeled off, right hand flat on a snack bar counter, a white paper cup sitting untouched. The date stamp lies by 3 hours because daylight saving fooled it. The detective smiles like a man meeting an old acquaintance at the exact wrong time that happens to be right. He freezes the frame and prints it, the ink drawing a ghost that stopped being shy. He brings the photo to the waitress's sister and she stares like people do when past and present get assigned the same chair. "That's him," she says, only she's careful. It's more like, "That could be the man who watched my sister's door and not her." He thanks her for the precision. He teaches himself to love cautious sentences more than he loves enthusiasm. The sheriff writes a note that reads like a doorstop. Petitioner to judge for warrants across old county lines. The judge grants with a pen that likes decisive verbs. They pull records from the boutique again, this time the books of 2003, a binder older and more reluctant. A sales slip detached from its page sticks to an envelope that wasn't its friend before today. Cash, a Thursday, a half name. The clerk who wrote the slip once moved to Colorado and now sells legal edibles. She remembers the ink, not the man. That is enough. The detective arranges the slips from 2003 beside 2005 like family portraits in frames that don't match. They share a face. He photographs the resemblance like a man not wanting to wake a sleeping house. Trash pulls become a ritual, not glamorous, absolutely holy. A city garbage truck yields a bag that yields a napkin that yields a mouth's worth of cells that yield numbers that hold hands with numbers. The detective already knows too well. The suspect sits in prison and doesn't volunteer. Other routes still loop to him. The DA tells him to be careful. Appeals teach men boldness, and bleeding new cases into old convictions invites procedural enthusiasm. He promises to keep his evidence bridle clean. He means it. He drives back to the bridge at an hour that used to be for sleep and finds a fresh scrape on the guardrail. Unrelated, obsolete, still an omen in the way all metal scuffs feel like warnings. He runs his palm along the scar and feels grit and history and maybe a little luck. He exhales into the damp air and calls the anthropologist, embarrassed to admit he needs dirt again. She laughs kindly, says dirt likes attention, and owes us nothing. She'll be there at first light. They grid the shoulder near the bridge and sift until patience pays out pocket change. A rivet head, a paper clip rusted into a question mark, a cigarette butt filtered with a lipstick he recognizes from 2003 trends like listening to an old song in a grocery store. He bags it all. He knows only one of those will matter and the rest will be furniture. He doesn't get to pick which. The lab makes a small trumpet noise. The lipstick's phantom carries the faint signature of the 2003 waitress's sister's mitochondrial line. Not proof, direction. He triangulates direction like you triangulate thunder. He draws a triangle on the map. Diner, bridge, storage unit. He writes Thursday at each point and draws an arrow that makes a circle. He palm slaps the desk softly, a man congratulating a dog that did nothing wrong. The reporter catches him in a hallway and offers him the gentlest ambush, a thermos of decent coffee and a question that's really a blessing disguised as curiosity. "If there's a door, will you be the hinge again?" He says yes without drama. It's a job description that finally learned to fit. He visits Elena's mother with flowers he picked up last minute and apologizes to them for being pressed into this. She takes them, smiles a practical smile that knows when to be small, and tells him she wrote another recipe card out last night and found Elena's handwriting on the back, directions to a laundromat that no longer exists, and a note beneath. Thursday, don't forget, some men lie polite. He copies it with care, the way you copy names into a book you intend to keep. He leaves with cinnamon on his coat and the peculiar courage sugar gives. The neighboring county requests a grand jury's ear. He brings them nouns and lets the DA from that county arrange adjectives. Trash pulls, boutique slips, VHS frames, the stud earring, the mitochondrial whisper, the storage locker's climate-controlled silence, the cap logo peeled and saved by someone who thought hoarding might one day be a service to truth. The room listens. The room nods. The room asks if the suspect's right hand knew how to hold flat in 2003 too. He says yes because some habits refuse to evolve. The room votes the way weather votes. Openly, then all at once. An indictment learns its name. He drives to the prison to serve papers that feel like echoes and gets stoned for his trouble. The suspect's face has aged into a billboard for consequences. Mint did not follow him inside. Thursday is a day he counts with a pencil someone else sharpened. He reads the fresh charges without theater. The suspect smiles a quarter inch and says the word appeal like a password that no door recognizes. The detective says, "We're not talking about yesterday." The suspect tilts his head, a man listening for a sound he no longer owns. The conversation ends without handshakes. Doors close with the discipline of institutions. Night stretches itself across 2 counties like a tarp that tries to keep weather off the truth and fails, as tarps always do. The diner neon flickers and chooses life. The rusted mailbox with no name hosts another moth and acts like it's been hosting moths professionally all along. The creek by the bridge sings in baritone again, frogs off-key and proud. The detective stands between counties, a man-shaped conjunction, and thinks about how solved and unsolved live in the same house, arguing over the thermostat and leaving notes on the fridge. He thinks about hinges. He thinks about doors that were made to swing in both directions, but sometimes choose one and wear a groove so deep the wood remembers. In bed, sleep doesn't posture, it negotiates. He offers it 30 minutes and gets an hour. He dreams a neat dream where coin and zipper tooth and glove box, print and mint and cap and crooked park line up like a parade and bow once and leave. He wakes to the more honest world of receipts and lab cues, and the genealogist texting him a small seed of a lead, a second cousin in a town wedged between his two who remembers a family story about a girl who vanished and an uncle who never loved cameras. He rubs his face and decides to like this day on purpose. The second cousin works at a car wash and has learned to see the tiny differences between dust and film and guilt. He remembers the uncle because the uncle tipped in new bills and scowled at air. He remembers a Thursday he couldn't leave early because a man kept running a truck through the rinse cycle like rain could teach it manners. The detective tracks the car wash receipts and finds a cash log with a half name that doesn't know it's about to be promoted to evidence. He thumbs the page, polite as always. Everything in this story gets a please. He stands on the small bridge one more night and says something out loud that surprises him with its formality. I will keep asking. Water pretends not to answer, but the wind comes through the cottonwoods with a sound like paper turned softly, a sound he has learned to translate. He goes home. He writes as much as his hand can stand. He draws another hinge and labels it 2003, turning. He circles it once, then twice, then sets the pen down and lets the house make the only music he needs. Refrigerator sermon, AC sigh, the clock's tidy applause for each second that refuses to pretend it is anything but itself. In the county lockup where 2005 learned its ending, the suspect tries to sleep and fails, a man pinned beneath the exact shape of his habits. In the other county where 2003 is clearing its throat, a waitress's sister sets a plate on a table for no one, then sits in front of it and eats half and covers the other half with foil, because leaving something saved is how you talk to ghosts with decent table manners. The reporter writes a piece she will keep in a drawer for later titled Nothing at All with the first sentence crossed out and the second underlined. When the hinge works, the door doesn't make a scene, it just moves. Morning comes like a busy letter. The lab is awake. The genealogist has new branches to climb. The sheriff in the neighboring county has learned to say the detective's first name without the formality of a title because battlefields make people practical about syllables. The DA writes the word extradition in a margin and draws a box around it as if to keep it from running off. Elena's mother puts a pie on the sill without the knife again and writes another note under the towel for the ones chasing Thursdays. He reads it hours later. He folds it and puts it in his pocket like a badge no one will see. He walks out to the lot, breath fogging just enough to feel personal, and unlocks his car. On the passenger seat, the two files keep their uneasy truce. Verdict on the left, indictment on the right, both with tabs like teeth showing. He starts the engine. The radio tries to sell him a mattress. He turns it off. He chooses the only music that has ever done anything for him. Road noise, wiper metronome, his own breath counting. The hinge holds. The door continues its work. Somewhere ahead of him, the bridge and the diner and the storage unit wait to be threaded together again and again until the knot stops slipping and the sentence agrees to end where it was always supposed to.